The city that never slept shimmered beneath a curtain of fading sunlight. From the 47th floor of Callahan Tower, the world below looked like a masterpiece of glass and ambition. Yellow cabs crawled along Fifth Avenue, horns blaring faintly through the soundproof windows. Inside, Benjamin Callahan stood before the wall of glass, staring at his reflection, a face the world admired, yet one that rarely smiled. He was the man people read about in magazines. Billionaire. Visionary. The tech genius who had built an empire from nothing but code, persistence, and cold precision. Every success story in New York seemed to mention his name. Yet, in the silence of his penthouse office, the applause of the world felt like static in his ears. On the corner of his desk, his phone buzzed again, the fifth missed call from his assistant. "The gala starts in 40 minutes, sir." The message glowed on the screen. Another charity event. Another public appearance where he'd smile for cameras and hand over oversized checks. To everyone else, it was proof of generosity. To Benjamin, it was a transaction, another performance to maintain the image of a man who cared. He turned away from the phone, his jaw tightening. The glass walls felt suffocating. Wealth had brought him comfort, but it had stripped away meaning. It had been years since he'd felt something genuine, joy, sorrow, compassion. Emotions were liabilities in his world. When the intercom buzzed, the sound startled him slightly. "Mr. Callahan," said the voice of his driver, Martin. "Car's ready whenever you are, sir." Benjamin hesitated. He glanced once more at the framed photo of his parents on the bookshelf, a reminder of a life far simpler. His mother's warm smile, his father's tired eyes after long shifts at the steel mill. They had taught him about hard work and humility, lessons he had buried beneath layers of profit margins and acquisition deals. "I'm not going," he said finally, pressing the intercom button. A brief pause followed. "Understood, sir." Benjamin loosened his tie, poured himself a glass of scotch, and sank into the leather chair by the window. The rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavier, drumming against the glass like restless fingers. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white. For reasons he couldn't explain, the storm unsettled him. He rose abruptly, grabbed his coat, and told Martin to pull the car around. "Take me home," he said. "But let's drive through East Harlem. I need air." Martin looked puzzled. It wasn't Benjamin's usual route. The billionaire rarely stepped outside the polished circles of Manhattan's elite. But Martin knew better than to question him. The car rolled through the slick streets, the wipers slashing rhythmically across the windshield. Streetlights reflected off puddles like fragments of broken mirrors. As they neared 118th Street, traffic came to a crawl. "Looks like a roadblock ahead," Martin said. "Should I take another way?" Benjamin stared out at the narrow alleys, half hidden behind rows of brick buildings. "No," he muttered. "Stop here. I'll walk." "Sir, in this weather?" "I said stop," Benjamin repeated quietly, his tone final. He stepped out into the rain, pulling his coat tighter. The cold air bit through the fabric, sharp and cleansing. For once, there were no board meetings, no shareholders, no assistants hovering nearby. Just the sound of water hitting pavement, and a strange, fragile sense of solitude he hadn't felt in years. The streets were nearly empty, except for a few flickering signs and a stray cat darting across the alley. Benjamin walked without direction, letting instinct lead him. The air smelled of wet asphalt and rust. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Then he heard it, faint, almost drowned by the rain. A soft sound. A whimper. He stopped, head tilting slightly. It came again, a muffled sob, small and desperate, carried by the wind. He followed the sound down a narrow side alley beside an old laundromat, its sign barely clinging to the frame. Broken glass crunched under his shoes. The light overhead flickered erratically, revealing the outline of a trash bin and a few discarded boxes. For a moment there was nothing. Only shadows and the pounding of rain. Then he saw movement, a small figure crouched in the corner, trembling violently. Benjamin's breath caught. It was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. Her clothes were soaked through, clinging to her tiny frame. She hugged something close to her chest, a stuffed rabbit, its fur matted and filthy. She looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes, her lips quivering. "Please," she whispered, barely audible. "Please don't take me back." Benjamin froze. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "Back where?" he asked gently, crouching down to her level. The girl shook her head, hugging the rabbit tighter. Her small body trembled as if the words themselves were dangerous. He glanced around. No adults. No open doors. Just the relentless rain and the echo of distant thunder. "You're freezing," he said softly. "You can't stay out here." She flinched when he moved closer. "Don't hurt me," she cried, her voice breaking. Benjamin stopped, raising his hands slightly. "I won't. I promise." For a few seconds they just stared at each other, two strangers from worlds apart, bound by the same invisible fear. Something in her eyes, that mixture of pain and defiance, stirred something long dormant inside him. He took off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. She hesitated, then let him. The fabric swallowed her small frame. "What's your name?" he asked. No answer. Just silence and shivering. "All right," he said softly. "Let's get you somewhere warm. You don't have to say anything yet." He reached out a hand. She looked at it, hesitant, uncertain, then slowly placed her tiny fingers in his. The contact was barely there, but it felt electric. As they stepped out of the alley, Benjamin noticed her limping slightly. Every protective instinct he didn't know he had began to rise. Whoever she was, whatever had happened, she needed help. And for the first time in years, he cared about something that couldn't be bought. Martin's eyes widened when Benjamin approached the car with the girl. "Sir, what?" "Don't ask," Benjamin said firmly. "Just drive." The car doors shut, sealing them inside from the storm. The little girl curled up in the seat, holding her rabbit close. Benjamin sat beside her, watching as her eyelids fluttered from exhaustion. "Sir, where to?" Martin asked quietly. Benjamin hesitated. The obvious answer would have been the nearest police station or hospital. But when he glanced at the girl, fragile, frightened, he couldn't bring himself to hand her over to strangers. "Not yet." "Home," he said finally. "Take us home." The car sped through the glistening streets toward his penthouse in Midtown. The city lights reflected off the windows like restless fireflies. The girl drifted in and out of sleep, murmuring softly. Benjamin watched her, his thoughts spiraling. How long had she been out there? Who was she running from? Why that terrified plea, "Don't take me back"? He had faced ruthless businessmen, government negotiations, hostile takeovers, but nothing unnerved him like this small, trembling child. When the car stopped at the tower, Martin handed him an umbrella. Benjamin carried the girl inside, shielding her from the rain. The doorman froze, confused, but Benjamin's tone left no room for questions. "She's with me." In the elevator, the girl's small hand clung weakly to his coat. The higher they rose, the quieter the world seemed. For a moment, he almost forgot about the cold emptiness that had ruled his life. As the elevator doors opened to the quiet luxury of his penthouse, the girl whispered something faint. "Will they find me here?" Benjamin looked down at her, startled by the fear in her voice. "No," he said softly. "Nobody will hurt you here." But even as he said it, he knew he had just stepped into something far greater and far darker than he could imagine. That night, as thunder rolled over Manhattan, Benjamin stood by the window, watching the storm rage across the skyline. Behind him, on the couch, the little girl slept, a stranger who had appeared from nowhere. He didn't know her name, her story, or the danger she carried. But something deep inside him whispered, this was not a coincidence. And whatever truth was hiding behind that terrified whisper, "Don't take me back," was only the beginning. The night Benjamin Callahan brought the little girl into his home, the city outside seemed to breathe differently, as if the storm itself had followed them inside. The penthouse, normally immaculate and quiet, felt alive with tension. Every drip from the girl's soaked clothes echoed through the marble-floored living room like a clock counting down to something inevitable. Benjamin wasn't used to this kind of silence, the uneasy human kind. Usually, his world buzzed with phone calls, conference alerts, and the polite hum of subservience. But now, all he could hear was the faint shiver of the girl as she clutched that worn-out stuffed rabbit. Maria, his longtime housekeeper, rushed out from the kitchen when she saw them. "Senor Benjamin," she gasped. "What happened? Who is this child?" "I found her outside," Benjamin said simply, removing his drenched coat. She was alone. Scared. Freezing. Maria's maternal instincts immediately took over. She grabbed a towel from the closet and wrapped it around the child, speaking softly. "You poor thing. You're safe now, honey." But the girl flinched at her touch and pulled away. "Please don't make me go back," she whispered again. Benjamin exchanged a glance with Maria, confusion, concern, a hint of fear. "No one's sending you anywhere tonight," Maria said gently. "You're staying here, okay?" The girl's eyes darted between them, suspicious, uncertain. Benjamin noticed the way she gripped the rabbit tighter whenever anyone moved too quickly. It wasn't just fear, it was the kind of terror that came from experience. He crouched down, trying to meet her gaze. "What's your name?" No answer. Just silence and shivering. Maria tried again. "Honey, can we call someone? Your parents, maybe?" The girl hesitated, then whispered, "Mommy said she'd come back. But she never did." Benjamin's chest tightened. Something in her voice, the hollow certainty, the exhaustion, made him feel like he was standing on the edge of a truth too heavy to bear. He stood, running a hand through his hair. "Maria, get her something warm to eat. Soup, maybe?" Maria nodded and hurried to the kitchen. Benjamin turned toward the living room window. The city below looked smaller than ever. All the wealth, all the power, suddenly meaningless compared to the trembling child in his home. When Maria returned with a tray of soup and bread, the girl was still standing in the same spot, barefoot, her wet hair clinging to her face. Maria set the tray down. "Eat, sweetheart. It's okay." The girl hesitated, then reached out slowly. Her hands were so small, so fragile. She ate in silence, her eyes flicking up every few seconds as if expecting someone to burst in and snatch her away. Benjamin watched, his mind racing with questions. Who was she running from? Where were her parents? And why did the mention of going back terrify her so deeply? When she finished, Maria led her to the guest room. "You can rest here tonight," she said softly. "The bathroom's right there. I'll bring some clothes." The girl nodded faintly but didn't move. She stood near the bed, staring at the floor. Maria stepped out to fetch clothes. Benjamin lingered in the doorway, uncertain whether to leave or stay. "Do you trust me?" he asked finally. The girl's small voice broke the silence. "You're not like them." Benjamin frowned. "Who?" She looked up, her eyes glistening. "The people at the shelter. The man there said I was special. But he hurt my friend and then she didn't wake up." Benjamin's blood ran cold. He knelt again, steadying his voice. "What's the man's name?" She shook her head. "I don't know. Everyone called him Doctor." Before he could ask more, Maria returned, and the girl retreated into the room, shutting the door quietly behind her. Hours passed. The penthouse fell into uneasy quiet. Benjamin sat by the fireplace, staring into the flames, trying to piece together fragments of her words. Doctor. Shelter. Friend didn't wake up. None of it made sense, yet it carried a weight that made his stomach knot. He couldn't stop thinking about her eyes. The kind of eyes that had seen something no child should ever see. Around midnight, he found himself walking down the hall toward the guest room. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, the little girl, now wrapped in one of his oversized shirts, was asleep on top of the covers, clutching the stuffed rabbit tightly. The city lights from the window painted her face in soft amber hues. She looked peaceful, but even in sleep, her body twitched as if reliving something she couldn't escape. Benjamin stepped closer and noticed a faint bruise along her wrist, another along her neck. His hands curled into fists. Whoever had done this wasn't going to get away with it. The next morning, Maria found him in the kitchen, already dressed and pacing. "You didn't sleep?" she asked. "Couldn't," he replied. "She said something last night. About a shelter. A man they called doctor." Maria crossed herself. "Madre de Dios. What kind of man hurts a child?" Benjamin's voice hardened. "The kind who hides behind charity names and paperwork." He grabbed his phone. "I'm calling Rick." "Your investigator friend?" He nodded. "If something happened to that girl, if there's anyone still out there doing this, I'm going to find them." Maria looked toward the hallway. "And what will you do with her in the meantime?" Benjamin hesitated. "She stays here. Until I know she's safe." Maria smiled faintly. "You've changed, senor." He almost laughed. "Maybe I'm just remembering what it feels like to care." Later that morning, Rick Lawson arrived. A tall man with gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Rick had been a detective for 20 years before retiring into private investigation. When Benjamin told him what had happened, Rick frowned. "You said she had a stuffed rabbit?" Benjamin nodded. "Why?" "Sometimes kids coming from bad situations hide things. Notes, IDs, even photos inside toys. A way to hold on to memories." Benjamin went to the guest room. The girl, Kayla as he would later learn, was awake, sitting on the bed. He approached carefully. "Hey, remember me?" She nodded slightly. "This is my friend Rick," Benjamin said gently. "He helps people. Like you." Rick crouched down, smiling warmly. "That's a cute rabbit. What's its name?" Kayla hesitated. "Bunny." "Can I see Bunny for a second?" Rick asked. "I promise I'll give it right back." Kayla clutched it tighter but then slowly handed it over. Rick inspected the seams, running a finger along the inner lining, and paused. He pulled a small tag from the back, faded but legible. "St. Mary's Pediatric Center, Newark, New Jersey." Benjamin's expression darkened. "That's a hospital." Rick nodded slowly. "Or at least it used to be. I think we just found our first clue." That afternoon, while Kayla napped in the guest room, Rick made some calls. He returned to Benjamin's study an hour later, his face grim. "St. Mary's was shut down 2 years ago," he said. "It was a private pediatric center run by a charity foundation, but the IRS pulled their license after reports of fraud, neglect, and worse." Benjamin's stomach sank. "Worse how?" Rick hesitated. "Kids went missing. No official explanation. The director vanished before charges could be filed. Name was Gerald Dunn." Benjamin leaned back, processing the information. "And you think this doctor she mentioned?" "Fits the timeline," Rick said. Dunn was a pediatric specialist. Called himself Dr. Dunn, even after the license was revoked. The air in the room grew heavy. Benjamin stared at the city skyline through the window, his reflection blurred against the glass. For years, his empire had made him feel untouchable, insulated from the world's pain. Now, one terrified child had cracked that illusion open like glass under pressure. "What are you going to do?" Rick asked quietly. Benjamin's voice was steady but cold. "Find him." That night, the rain returned, softer this time but constant. Benjamin stood once again by the window, looking out at the city that had always seemed so alive, now feeling like a maze of secrets. Behind him, the little girl's soft footsteps echoed. She stood there holding her rabbit. "You're not sending me away, right?" He turned. "No, Kayla. You're safe here." She hesitated, then whispered, "You're different from him." He smiled too. But his eyes were mean. Benjamin knelt down. "No one will hurt you again. That's a promise." She nodded and went back to bed, leaving Benjamin alone with the echo of her words. He smiled too, but his eyes were mean. As the clock ticked past midnight, he realized this night had already changed everything. He wasn't just a bystander anymore. He was part of the story now, and there was no turning back. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Inside, Benjamin opened his laptop, typing the name Gerald Dunn into the search bar. A list of news headlines appeared: closed hospitals, missing children, untraceable funds. At the very bottom of the search results was a familiar address. A property leased under one of his own corporations. Benjamin's heart stopped. Whatever darkness this man was hiding, Benjamin had unknowingly helped build the walls around it. Morning light spilled across the penthouse, painting streaks of gold across glass and stone. For years, Benjamin Callahan's mornings had been a blur of coffee, phone calls, and financial reports. But today felt different. For the first time in decades, he wasn't thinking about boardrooms or markets. He was thinking about a frightened little girl asleep in the next room. He poured himself a cup of coffee and stood by the window, the same view of Manhattan that used to make him feel powerful now only reminding him how many lives he'd ignored from up here. His thoughts were broken by soft footsteps. "Good morning," came a timid voice. He turned to see the little girl, Kayla, standing by the doorway holding her stuffed rabbit close. Her hair was still damp from the shower Maria had given her, and her borrowed clothes hung loose around her small frame. Benjamin smiled faintly. "Morning, Kayla. Did you sleep okay?" She nodded, though the dark circles under her eyes said otherwise. The lights were too bright. "I kept thinking someone was coming." He crouched down to her level. "No one's coming here unless we let them, okay? You're safe now." She looked unsure but gave a small nod. "You promise?" "I do." Maria stepped in from the kitchen holding a plate of pancakes. "And I promise breakfast." "Come on, sweetheart." Kayla hesitated again before following her. Benjamin watched her move, cautious, deliberate, like someone who had learned that even kindness could hurt if you trusted it too quickly. As they sat at the dining table, Maria tried to lighten the mood. "You must like pancakes. Everyone likes pancakes." Kayla blinked at her plate. "We used to get cereal at the shelter. But only if we were quiet." Benjamin and Maria exchanged a look. The weight in her tone was too old for her age. "Did you have any friends there?" Maria asked gently. Kayla's fork paused midway. "Lena. She used to share her blanket when I got cold. But she didn't wake up one morning." Benjamin's heart clenched. "What happened to her?" Kayla's lips trembled. "The doctor said she was sick. But I heard her crying before she went to sleep." "She wasn't sick." The air in the room turned still. Maria reached across the table and squeezed Kayla's hand. "You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to." Kayla nodded, eyes lowered. "It's okay. I don't want to remember." Later that day, while Maria took Kayla to pick out some clothes from a nearby boutique, Benjamin met with Rick in his study. Rick dropped a folder onto the desk. "I did some digging. That property under your company's name? It's a warehouse, used to store medical equipment for charity shipments. But according to records, it hasn't been inspected in over 3 years." Benjamin frowned. "And my signature's on the lease?" Rick nodded. "Your foundation partnered with several smaller charities around that time. One of them was called Hopewell Care Initiative. Guess who the founder was?" "Gerald Dunn," Benjamin muttered. "Bingo." Benjamin leaned back, pinching the bridge of his nose. "So I was funding him. Unknowingly." Rick crossed his arms. "You weren't the only one. Dunn was clever. Used big names to look legitimate. When things fell apart, everyone distanced themselves fast, except you. The company records never got cleared." Benjamin's jaw tightened. "So his operation could still be running under my name?" Rick nodded. "That's what it looks like." For a moment, Benjamin said nothing. Then, with quiet resolve, "We're shutting it down. Whatever it takes." That evening, Kayla came back from shopping. Maria had done her best to make it feel like a normal day, ice cream, new shoes, a small pink backpack she'd picked out herself. But even then, Kayla's smile never reached her eyes. As Benjamin passed the living room, he saw her sitting cross-legged on the rug, tracing invisible patterns on the carpet. "Hey," he said softly, kneeling down. "That's a nice backpack." She nodded. "Maria says I can use it for school one day." "One day soon," he replied. "Would you like that?" Her voice was small. "I don't know. People stare." "Why do you think they stare?" Kayla looked up at him. "Because I don't belong anywhere." The words hit harder than he expected. He remembered being a boy from a poor Brooklyn neighborhood, mocked, overlooked, told he'd never amount to anything. Maybe that's why he couldn't walk away from her. "You belong here, Kayla," he said quietly. "At least until we find where you're supposed to be." Her brow furrowed. "What if I don't have a place?" He hesitated. "Then we'll make one." That night, Benjamin couldn't sleep again. He sat in his office, staring at the faint glow of his laptop screen. Every article about Gerald Dunn painted a darker picture. Fraud, missing children, illegal trials under the guise of medical research, and all hidden behind charity programs for vulnerable kids. A memory flashed in his mind, a corporate gala 2 years ago. A man shaking his hand, thanking him for his generosity toward Hopewell's cause. That had been done. The same polite smile. The same confident tone. Benjamin slammed the laptop shut, anger rising in his chest. Just then he heard something, a faint sound coming from down the hall. He stood following the noise. It was soft at first, a muffled whimper. When he reached Kayla's room, the door was cracked open. Inside, she was tossing in her sleep, whispering through tears. "Please don't. I didn't mean to. I'll be good." Benjamin's heart sank. He sat by the edge of the bed and gently touched her shoulder. "Hey, it's okay. You're safe. It's just a dream." She jolted awake, gasping for air. For a second, she didn't recognize him, her eyes wide with terror, until she saw his face and froze. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice trembling. "I didn't mean to make noise." "You don't have to apologize, Kayla," he said softly. "You can cry, you can shout, you can dream. No one will hurt you here." She looked at him, her small hands gripping the blanket. "You said people can't come here unless you let them." "That's right." "Then don't let the doctor in." Benjamin felt his throat tighten. "He doesn't know where you are." She nodded slowly but didn't lie back down. Instead, she whispered, "I saw him last night. In my dream. He said you'd help him again." The words chilled him to the bone. He stayed with her until she drifted back to sleep, then stepped quietly into the hall. For a long moment he stood there, thinking. Was it just a dream? Or had Dunn somehow resurfaced, ready to manipulate the system again? Benjamin pulled out his phone and texted Rick. "We need to visit the warehouse tomorrow." Quietly. The next morning, Kayla joined him for breakfast, her eyes brighter than before, though she still clutched Bunny tightly. Maria fussed over her hair while humming a tune. For a brief second, it almost felt normal, like they were a family. But beneath that warmth was a current of unease. Benjamin's thoughts were already on what he might find that afternoon. He glanced toward Kayla and asked, "Do you remember anything about where the shelter was? Maybe a sign, a street name?" Kayla tilted her head. There was a big white building, with red letters on the side, and a smell, like medicine and bleach. Rick, who had just walked in, caught Benjamin's eye. "That matches the old St. Mary's property line," he said quietly. Kayla blinked. "Are you going there?" Benjamin hesitated. "Yes, but only to make sure no other kids are in danger." "Can I come?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not this time, sweetheart. You'll stay here with Maria. I promise I'll be back soon." She didn't look convinced, but she nodded anyway. A few hours later, Benjamin and Rick drove through the rain-slick streets of Newark. The old warehouse loomed ahead, rusted gates, boarded windows, a half-collapsed sign that once read Hopewell Care Distribution. Rick parked the car. Looks abandoned. Benjamin scanned the structure. Looks can lie. They pushed through the side door, the air heavy with the smell of mold and chemicals. Dust covered everything: crates, broken desks, old medical charts. Rick pulled out a flashlight, sweeping the beam across the room. "Over here," he said, pointing to a set of newer footprints in the dust. Someone had been there recently. They followed the trail down a corridor lined with storage rooms. One door stood out, newer lock, polished metal, unlike the rest. Rick knelt and examined it. Not standard issue. Someone's still using this place. Benjamin's pulse quickened. "Open it." Rick picked the lock in seconds. The door creaked open to reveal a small office space. Files scattered across the floor, papers marked with numbers and dates. On the desk sat a single photo frame. Benjamin stepped closer and froze. It was a picture of him shaking hands with Gerald Dunn. Beneath the photo was a note scribbled in red ink. "Some debts can't be erased, Benjamin." The room seemed to close in on him. Rick's voice broke the silence. "He's taunting you. He knows we're getting close." Benjamin stared at the photo, jaw tight. "Then let him know I'm not running anymore." As they turned to leave, a faint sound echoed through the warehouse, a door slamming somewhere deeper inside. Rick raised his flashlight. "We're not alone." Benjamin's phone buzzed. A new message. A known number. "She remembers more than she should. Don't make me come for her." Benjamin's blood ran cold. He looked at Rick. He knows about Kayla. The message on Benjamin's phone glowed in the dim light of the warehouse. "She remembers more than she should. Don't make me come for her." The words burned into his mind. For a moment, neither he nor Rick moved. The silence inside the decaying building grew heavier, like the walls themselves were listening. Rick finally spoke. "That text came from a blocked number?" Benjamin nodded. "Untraceable." Rick frowned. "He's watching you, Ben. Probably knew the moment you opened that door." Benjamin's jaw tightened. "Then he knows I'm not backing down." Rick's voice dropped. "And now he knows where your weakness is." Benjamin didn't have to ask what he meant. The image of Kayla flashed in his mind, small, trembling, trying to be brave. The thought of Dunn or anyone else getting near her twisted something deep inside him. He turned toward the exit. "We're leaving. Now." Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air was thick with fog. Streetlights glowed faintly through the mist as they walked to the car. Benjamin's pulse was still hammering. As soon as they got in, Rick started typing on his phone. "I'm sending the message to a friend in cybercrimes. Maybe he can trace it." Benjamin stared out the windshield, his reflection staring back at him, pale, shaken, but determined. Rick's phone buzzed back with a reply. He scanned it quickly. No location trace, but the message was sent through a private server based in the city. Whoever this guy is, he's still local. Benjamin exhaled slowly. "Then we're close." Rick looked at him sharply. "Close doesn't mean safe. He's one step ahead. You need to be careful, especially with that kid." Benjamin nodded, though his thoughts were already racing ahead. He won't touch her. Not again. By the time they returned to the penthouse, it was almost midnight. The city skyline was veiled in mist, glowing faintly against the darkness. Inside, Maria was waiting in the living room, worry written all over her face. "Senor Benjamin, I was getting scared," she said. "You said you'd be back hours ago." Benjamin forced a small smile. "Sorry, Maria. Things took longer than I expected." Her eyes narrowed when she saw the tension on his face. "Something happened, didn't it?" Before he could answer, Kayla appeared at the top of the staircase, holding Bunny in one hand. "I couldn't sleep," she said softly. "Did you find him?" Benjamin hesitated. "We found something. But you don't need to worry about that, okay? You're safe here." She looked at him for a long moment as if trying to decide whether to believe him. Then she nodded and went back to her room. When she was gone, Maria lowered her voice. Whatever you're mixed up in, you need to protect that child. She's been through enough. Benjamin nodded. I know. He went to his study, locking the door behind him. For hours, he sat staring at the text message, replaying everything that had happened. The photo, the message, the warning. Don't make me come for her. Whoever sent that wasn't bluffing. Dunn was out there, alive, and he wanted Kayla back. The next morning, Benjamin arranged for a private security team to monitor the penthouse discreetly. 2 guards were stationed in the lobby, another patrolled the parking level. Rick installed cameras at every entry point. Kayla noticed immediately. Why are there so many people now? She asked at breakfast. Benjamin tried to smile. Just some extra help. To make sure everyone here stays safe. She studied him for a moment. You're scared too, aren't you? Her words caught him off guard. He hesitated, then nodded. A little. But being scared just means you have something worth protecting. Kayla looked down at her plate. Then I'll be scared too. That afternoon, Rick came by again with updates. I've been cross-checking charity records. Turns out Hopewell Care had several satellite shelters across the state, but one of them reopened last month under a new name, Safe Future Foundation. Benjamin frowned. Run by who? Rick flipped through his notes. Officially? A woman named Dr. Karen Bell. But her paperwork traces back to Dunn's old network. Same funding patterns, same suppliers. He's using her as a front. Benjamin's mind raced. So the same operation could still be going, right under everyone's noses. Exactly, Rick said. And the worst part? They've started new clinical programs for children from low-income neighborhoods. Benjamin clenched his fists. Not again. Rick met his gaze. If Kayla remembers details, names, locations, she could be the key to shutting this whole thing down. Benjamin hesitated. I can't push her. She's just starting to feel safe. Then we do it carefully, Rick said. But we have to try. That evening, Benjamin found Kayla in the living room, drawing quietly with a box of crayons Maria had given her. He sat beside her. That's beautiful, he said softly, pointing to her sketch. A girl standing by a window with rain falling outside. It's me, she said simply. When I was waiting for Mommy. He hesitated, then asked, Do you remember where that was? Kayla paused, her crayon hovering above the paper. There was a big gate. And a man with a badge who said Mommy wasn't allowed inside. She cried a lot. Then she left. Benjamin's heart sank. And after that? Kayla frowned. The doctor said Mommy didn't love me anymore. But that's not true. He nodded. No, it's not. She looked at him. Are you trying to find her? Benjamin hesitated. Yes. I'm trying to find everyone who hurt you, so they can't hurt anyone else. Kayla's eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. Can you find Lena too? The name made him pause. Lena? My friend, she said. The one who didn't wake up. I saw her once, after that. The doctor said she was sleeping in another room. But she looked different. Benjamin's stomach turned. Different how? Kayla's voice dropped to a whisper. Like she wasn't real anymore. He didn't press further. It was enough to know something terrible had been done, something bigger than neglect or fraud. Later that night, as the city settled into its uneasy silence, Benjamin sat by his desk reviewing files Rick had sent. He barely noticed the storm brewing outside until lightning flashed across the glass walls of the penthouse. Then his phone buzzed again. Another message from the same blocked number. You should have stayed out of it, Benjamin. You can't protect what's already mine. He stood abruptly, scanning the security monitors on his screen. The guards were still in position, one at the lobby, another near the elevator. Everything looked normal, until one camera flickered. A brief glitch, then static. Rick, he muttered, dialing his number. Check the security feed. Channel 5 just went out. Rick answered immediately. On it. But before he could respond again, the power cut out. The penthouse went completely dark. Benjamin's heart pounded as emergency lights flickered to life. He grabbed the flashlight from his desk and moved quickly toward Kayla's room. "Kayla?" he called, voice low but urgent. No response. He pushed open the door. Empty. The bed covers tossed aside, Bunny lying on the floor. For a split second, panic froze him in place. Then he heard a faint noise, the creak of the balcony door. He rushed over and found it slightly open. Cold air poured in from outside, carrying the sound of distant sirens. He stepped out onto the balcony, empty. No sign of her. Just the city below, vast and indifferent. Then, faintly from somewhere in the stairwell came a sound, a muffled cry. "Benjamin?" It was Maria's voice, panicked. "She's gone." Benjamin sprinted down the hall, heart pounding, as the elevator alarm blared in the distance. He reached the security screen just as the backup generator kicked in. The feed flickered back on, showing the lobby elevator descending. Inside, a small figure stood clutching a stuffed rabbit. And behind her, a man in a dark coat, his face obscured by the hood. The elevator doors closed. Benjamin's blood ran cold. Benjamin's hands trembled as he stared at the flickering security monitor. There she was, Kayla, standing in the elevator, clutching Bunny, eyes wide and terrified. And behind her, a man in a dark coat, head lowered as if hiding his face from the camera. The elevator numbers dropped slowly. 35, 34, 33. Benjamin slammed his fist against the console. "Come on." Rick's voice crackled through the phone. "What's happening?" "She's gone," Benjamin shouted, already sprinting toward the door. "He took her, she's in the elevator." Rick cursed on the other end. "I'm calling the police. Don't do anything reckless." But Benjamin was already in motion. He tore through the hall, past Maria, who stood frozen in shock. "Stay here," he yelled. "Lock the doors." The stairwell echoed with his footsteps as he descended floor after floor. His chest burned, but he didn't stop. Somewhere below, the elevator bell dinged, a mechanical mockery of calm. By the time he reached the lobby, the doors had already opened. The guard on duty was lying unconscious beside the desk. The lobby doors were wide open, letting the night wind rush through. Benjamin ran outside. The street was empty, slick from the earlier rain, headlights blurring past in the distance. No sign of the man, no sign of Kayla. He turned in a slow circle, his breathing ragged. "Kayla," he shouted into the street. "Kayla." But only the city answered back, cold and indifferent. Rick arrived 10 minutes later, flashing lights from patrol cars already painting the street red and blue. 2 officers were speaking with Maria near the entrance. She was shaking, tears streaking her face. "He just came in," she told them. He knew exactly where to go. Benjamin stood apart from them, staring into the darkness. His shirt was soaked, but not from rain, from sweat and fear. Rick approached quietly. "Security footage?" "Corrupted," Benjamin said bitterly. He jammed the feed. "The only clear image we got was when the elevator doors closed." Rick ran a hand over his face. "That means he had access to the building system. This wasn't random, it was planned." Benjamin turned sharply. "Then he knew about the security upgrades before we even installed them." Rick nodded grimly. "Inside job." The detective in charge, Lieutenant Sarah Monroe, approached. "Mr. Callahan, I understand this is difficult, but we'll need you to stay calm. Do you have any idea who might have taken her?" Benjamin hesitated, exchanging a glance with Rick. "Gerald Dunn," he said finally. "He's the man behind an organization called Hopewell Care Initiative, and now Safe Future Foundation." Monroe's brow furrowed. "That name sounds familiar. There was a federal investigation into that group a few years ago. It vanished before charges were filed." "Because Dunn vanished too," Benjamin said, voice tight. "Until tonight." Monroe scribbled notes. "If this man is as dangerous as you say, we'll need every detail you have." Photos, locations, associates, everything. Rick handed over the folder he'd brought. It's all in here. We've been tracking him. Monroe took it and nodded to her team. We'll start with the building's exterior footage. He couldn't have gone far. Benjamin shook his head. He's not stupid. He'll have a plan. He wanted me to see that message, to make me chase him. Monroe frowned. You think this was personal? Benjamin's eyes darkened. I think it was a warning. Hours passed. Police cars came and went, officers combing nearby streets. The fog had thickened, blurring the city lights into ghostly halos. Benjamin stood by the glass doors of his building, staring out into the night. Every sound made him turn, hoping, fearing. Rick returned from speaking with the detectives. No trace so far. Cameras caught a black van leaving the block about 5 minutes after the elevator footage cuts off. No license plate. Benjamin's fists tightened. Then we start there. Check every traffic cam in a 10-mile radius. Rick sighed. Ben, the cops are already on it. You need rest. You haven't slept in days. I'll rest when she's back, Benjamin snapped. Rick studied him for a moment. You've gotten attached to that kid fast. Benjamin didn't look away. She's just a kid, Rick. Nobody protected her before. I won't be another person who turns away. Rick nodded slowly. Then we find her. By dawn, Benjamin's penthouse felt like a hollow shell. The air was too still, the silence too loud. Maria moved through the rooms like a ghost, clutching her rosary and muttering prayers under her breath. On the coffee table lay Bunny, Kayla's stuffed rabbit, torn at one seam, stuffing peeking out. Benjamin picked it up, staring at the frayed fabric. Something about it felt wrong. He reached inside and pulled at the loose thread. A tiny piece of folded paper fell out. He unfolded it slowly. Scrawled in a child's shaky handwriting were the words. He said he knows you. He said you made the place for him. Benjamin's throat tightened. It was a note, one Kayla must have hidden before she was taken. His mind flashed back to the warehouse, the photo of him shaking hands with Dunn. The connection was undeniable now. He had funded the very place where this child had suffered. And Dunn wanted him to remember that. A sharp knock at the door broke his thoughts. It was Rick again, holding a tablet. I might have something, he said. He placed the tablet on the table and opened a map. Traffic cams picked up that van near the Lincoln Tunnel around 12:45 a.m., heading toward New Jersey. But here's the weird part, it disappeared from every camera right after. Benjamin frowned. So it went off-grid. Exactly, Rick said. There's a service road near the tunnel that leads to some old warehouses. Same area as the first Hopewell facility. Benjamin looked up. You think he's gone back to where it started? Rick nodded. Monsters like him always circle back to their lair. Benjamin's voice hardened. Then that's where I'm going. Rick grabbed his arm. Hold on. You can't just storm in there. We don't know what's waiting. Benjamin met his gaze. I don't care. That little girl trusted me. I made her a promise. Rick exhaled. Fine. But you're not going alone. That evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, the two men prepared quietly. Rick checked his pistol, then handed Benjamin a small flashlight. You sure you're ready for this? Benjamin nodded. I've never been more ready. They drove in silence through the outskirts of the city, the streetlights thinning as they approached the industrial zone. Rusted warehouses loomed in the darkness, shadows stretching long across cracked pavement. Rick parked the car a block away. We go in slow, he said. No hero moves. Benjamin nodded, though his heart was pounding. Every step he took brought him closer, not just to Kayla, but to the truth he'd been running from for years. They reached the fence surrounding the old Hopewell facility. A single light flickered above the main door. Rick crouched low. There, movement near the east wing. Benjamin followed his gaze. A shadow passed across the window, tall, deliberate, and unmistakably human. He tightened his grip on the flashlight. That's him. Rick reached for his radio. I'll call Monroe for backup. But before he could, a faint sound cut through the silence. A child's voice, distant but clear. Help me. Benjamin froze. Kayla. He moved before Rick could stop him, slipping through the gap in the fence and running toward the sound. Inside the building, the air was heavy with damp and decay. Broken glass crunched under his shoes. Somewhere deeper inside, that same small voice echoed again. Please, somebody help. He followed it down a narrow corridor, past doors marked research and storage. The sound was coming from a room at the end. He pushed the door open and froze. In the middle of the room sat an old speaker, crackling with static. From it came Kayla's voice, repeating the same desperate plea. A recording. Benjamin's stomach dropped. And then, from behind him, a familiar voice spoke. Always the hero, Benjamin. Still trying to fix the mess you helped create. He turned slowly. Standing in the doorway, dressed in black and smiling faintly, was Gerald Dunn. Benjamin's pulse thundered in his ears. The man who had haunted a child's nightmares, the man behind every unanswered question, was now standing a few feet away, calm and confident. Dunn smiled wider. Welcome back to your legacy. The dim light buzzed above them, throwing long shadows across the cracked concrete floor. Benjamin's breath caught in his chest as Dunn stepped fully into view, calm, poised, with that same condescending half-smile that had haunted the photographs Rick had shown him. He looked older now. The expensive suit he wore was slightly wrinkled, and a faint scar traced along his left cheek. But his eyes, cold, calculating, hadn't changed. Gerald Dunn, Benjamin said, voice low. You took her. Dunn chuckled, his tone smooth, almost polite. Took her? Benjamin, you make it sound like a kidnapping. I simply reclaimed what was mine. Benjamin's fists clenched. She's a child, not a possession. Dunn tilted his head. And yet, when she cried in the dark, it was your name she whispered. How curious that she trusted you so easily. Benjamin's pulse quickened. Where is she? Safe, Dunn replied, his voice calm as ever. Safer than she ever was under your roof. Cut the games. Benjamin took a step forward. If you've hurt her. Dunn raised a hand, cutting him off. You won't do anything, Benjamin. Because deep down you know this isn't about her. It's about you. Benjamin's jaw tightened. You're insane. Dunn smiled wider. Am I? You built my world. You gave me the funds to start the Hopewell Center. You wrote the checks. You never asked where the money went. You just wanted good press for your company's philanthropy division. You built the walls that trapped her. Benjamin froze. The words hit him harder than any punch. I didn't know, he said quietly. Dunn's eyes gleamed. But you should have. That's the point, Benjamin. People like you never ask questions. You just want the illusion of goodness, the applause, the magazine covers. You pretend to care about the broken, but you never get your hands dirty. Benjamin stepped closer, his voice shaking with anger. You're wrong. I've seen what you did to those kids. You destroyed lives. You used them. Dunn's expression shifted, something between pride and resentment. Used them? No, Benjamin. I tested them. Every one of those children came from a system that had already failed them. I gave them structure. Order. Benjamin's voice rose. You abused them. Dunn's calm cracked for the first time. I saved them, he snapped, slamming a hand against the wall. The echo filled the room. You can't save what's already broken. You can only shape it into something useful. For a long, heavy moment, neither man spoke. The hum of the light above seemed to grow louder. Then Benjamin said softly, Where is she, Dunn? Dunn's smile returned, eerie, knowing. You'll find her soon enough. But before you do, you'll have to decide what kind of man you really are. What do you mean? Look around, Dunn said, gesturing toward the shadows behind him. This building has cameras. Hidden ones. You've been recorded since the moment you stepped inside. By now, the footage has already been sent to several media outlets. Benjamin's stomach dropped. What footage? The footage of you breaking into private property, trespassing, threatening me. Dunn's grin widened. Imagine the headlines, Benjamin. Tech billionaire assaults charity director. Public opinion is such a fragile thing, isn't it? Benjamin's voice turned to ice. You won't get away with this. Oh, I already have, Dunn said calmly. By the time you crawl back to your tower, the world will see me as the victim, and you as the monster. I don't need to kill you, Benjamin. I just need to ruin you. He stepped closer until they were only a few feet apart. And when you lose everything, your money, your power, your name, maybe then you'll understand what those children felt. Benjamin stared at him, fury and disbelief twisting inside him. You think this is about revenge? He said. This is about Kayla. You hurt her. You hurt all of them, and I'll make sure the world knows what you've done. Dunn's eyes glinted in the light. You can try. But you've already played your role perfectly. You built my kingdom, and now you'll help burn yours to the ground. A sudden crash broke the tension, a sound from somewhere deeper in the building. Both men froze. Dunn frowned, glancing toward the hallway. Rick's voice shouted from the distance, Ben, you okay? Dunn cursed under his breath. Persistent as ever, your watchdog. Benjamin took the chance. He lunged forward, grabbing Dunn by the collar. The two struggled, crashing into a metal table. Dunn swung wildly, but Benjamin pinned him against the wall. Where is she? Benjamin roared. Dunn gasped, laughing through the struggle. You're too late. A small device slipped from his hand, a remote, red light blinking. Before Benjamin could react, Dunn hit the button. A low rumble shook the floor, followed by the sound of grinding metal. Somewhere nearby, a door slammed shut automatically. Rick burst into the room, gun drawn. Ben, move. Dunn used the distraction to shove Benjamin back and sprint toward the exit. Rick fired once. The bullet hit the wall inches away from Dunn's head as he disappeared into the dark corridor. Benjamin cursed and ran after him, but the hallway door had sealed shut. Behind the reinforced glass, Dunn stood on the other side, breathing hard but grinning like a man who knew he had already won. He lifted his hand, showing Benjamin something, Kayla's small bracelet. Then he placed it against the glass and let it drop. You'll see her soon, Dunn said. But not before she learns who you really are. Then he was gone. The silence afterward felt deafening. Rick holstered his weapon and kicked the door, frustration flashing in his eyes. Damn it, he's gone again. Benjamin knelt, picking up the bracelet. The tiny heart-shaped charm was cracked down the middle. She's still alive, he said, his voice trembling. He wouldn't taunt me if she wasn't. Rick nodded, scanning the room. We'll find her. But we need to get out before this place collapses. That noise, he rigged something. As if on cue, the floor above groaned loudly. Dust fell from the ceiling. Benjamin pocketed the bracelet. Then move. They sprinted down the hall, navigating collapsing debris as pipes hissed and concrete cracked around them. The entire east wing was coming apart. They burst through the exit just as part of the building gave way, sending a cloud of dust into the air. Outside, the sky was starting to lighten, the faintest glow of dawn touching the horizon. Benjamin turned to look back at the burning structure, chest heaving. He's not finished, he said quietly. This was just his warning. Rick looked at him, face grim. Then we find him before he sends his next one. Benjamin stared at the bracelet in his hand, the faint engraving on the charm barely visible through the soot. Eret forever, Mom. He whispered under his breath. Hold on, Kayla. I'm coming. As the fire crews arrived, Benjamin's phone buzzed in his pocket. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. A soft, trembling voice whispered on the other end, barely audible. Mr. Benjamin, he said you're not who you think you are. The line went dead. Benjamin froze. The voice was Kayla's. The rain had returned to New York, soft, steady, and merciless. It tapped against the tall windows of Benjamin's penthouse, filling the silence that had settled over the place like a fog. He sat alone in his study, the glow of the city dim behind him. Kayla's bracelet lay on his desk, the little heart charm cracked in two. He hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. His mind replayed the night over and over, searching for something he could have done differently. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Dunn's face, the grin, the taunts, the fire. And then he heard her voice again. He said, "You're not who you think you are." Those words echoed like a curse. He leaned forward, resting his head in his hands. "What did you mean, Kayla?" he whispered. Across the room, the clock ticked steadily, each second dragging like guilt itself. Rick entered quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You look like hell," he said, setting one down beside Benjamin. Benjamin didn't look up. "You find anything?" Rick sighed, pulling up a chair. The fire department confirmed what we already knew. Dunn's trail went cold after the explosion. No sign of him, no sign of the van. But Benjamin lifted his head slowly. "But what?" Rick handed him a folder. Inside were several printed documents, contracts, invoices, donation ledgers. All bore the logo of Callahan Industries' Philanthropy Division. Benjamin frowned. "These are old records." "Yeah," Rick said. "From 6 years ago. Look at the signatures." Benjamin scanned the pages, his own name written over and over. Donations to Hopewell Care Foundation, millions in funding. Rick pointed at the fine print. These funds went directly into shell accounts, all connected to Dunn's operations. Your name gave him legitimacy. Benjamin's heart sank. "So I built his empire." Rick hesitated. "Not knowingly. He covered his tracks well. But, yeah, you helped him rise." Benjamin stood, pacing toward the window. "All those children he hurt, all those lives, and my money paid for it." Rick leaned forward. "Ben, listen. You didn't know. That doesn't matter." Benjamin's voice broke, raw and heavy. "I should have known. I just signed whatever my PR team put in front of me. Smiled for the cameras. Wrote checks to make myself look like a good man." He turned, eyes hollow. "This is on me, Rick." Rick was silent for a moment. "Then make it count for something. Use what you have to stop him now." Benjamin exhaled shakily. "How?" "He's always 10 steps ahead." Rick nodded toward the folder. "Not this time. There's something else in there, something Dunn didn't erase." Benjamin flipped through the pages until he found it. A line item dated 8 months earlier, transferred to St. Mary's Pediatric Research Wing, Newark. He froze. St. Mary's. "That's the same hospital from the tag in Kayla's stuffed rabbit," Rick said. "Maybe it's not just a coincidence." Benjamin's pulse quickened. "If he's using that name again, he's hiding something there." Rick nodded. "Exactly. I already sent someone to pull property records. The building's been sold 3 times in the past 2 years under different names. Latest owner, a company called North Star Development Group." Benjamin narrowed his eyes. "Let me guess, a shell corporation?" Rick smirked. "You're catching on fast." For a while, the 2 men worked in silence, piecing together the web Dunn had spun. Fake charities, false medical studies, money laundering through philanthropic fronts. The deeper they dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't just corruption. It was control. Dunn used compassion as his disguise. Benjamin finally leaned back, exhausted. "All this time I thought I was helping people. Turns out I was feeding a monster." Rick closed the folder. "Then starve him, Ben. Take back everything he used." Benjamin nodded slowly. "Yeah. But before I do that, I need to find her." That night he returned to Kayla's room. It looked untouched, the small pink blanket folded neatly on her bed, the stuffed animal still sitting by the pillow. He sat on the edge of the bed holding Bunny, the stuffed rabbit she'd carried everywhere. For the first time he noticed something else, a faint stitch mark near the rabbit's leg. Carefully he pulled at the seam, and a small photograph slipped out. It was old and crumpled but clear enough. A woman holding a baby in her arms, Kayla. The woman's face was kind, weary, but familiar somehow. Benjamin frowned, his heart racing. I've seen her before. He hurried to his study, opening the folder again. In one of the old donation photos, a charity gala from 6 years ago, he spotted her in the background, standing behind Don, wearing a hospital badge that read, Janice Brooks, Nurse, St. Mary's Hospital. Benjamin stared at the image, realization sinking in. Kayla's mother. Rick looked up from his laptop. Who? Janice Brooks, Benjamin said. She worked at St. Mary's. She must have known Dunn was up to something, maybe even tried to expose him. Rick nodded. If she did, that could explain why she disappeared. Dunn made sure of it. Benjamin's voice hardened. Then she's the key to everything. Rick closed his laptop. You think she's still alive? I have to believe she is, Benjamin said quietly. And if she is, she knows where he took Kayla. He didn't sleep that night. Every sound, every shadow seemed to whisper guilt and warning. By morning he was standing at his office window watching the city wake. Below him, cars moved like veins of light through the streets. He wondered how many other lives he'd touched without knowing, how many people had paid the price for his ignorance. Rick entered, holding a new file. Got the records from Newark. You'll want to see this. Benjamin opened it, a list of St. Mary's former staff. Some had relocated, some retired. But one stood out, Janice Brooks, status, missing since 2019. Last known location, New Jersey State Hospital, psychiatric ward. Benjamin's eyes widened. She's alive. Rick nodded. Maybe. The hospital records show she was admitted under a Jane Doe case after a car accident. Severe memory loss. Never identified until now. Benjamin's grip tightened on the file. We're going there. Rick hesitated. You sure you're ready for what you might find? Benjamin turned toward him. No. But I owe it to Kayla, and to her mother, to try. Later that day, Benjamin and Rick drove across the bridge into New Jersey. The clouds hung low, heavy with unspoken things. The world outside seemed muted, like it was holding its breath. As they approached the hospital, Benjamin's chest tightened. The building stood gray and tired, its windows fogged by years of sorrow. Inside, the halls smelled faintly of antiseptic and old paper. Nurses moved quietly, their faces unreadable. At the front desk, Benjamin showed the file. We're looking for a patient who was admitted as Jane Doe 5 years ago, possibly now identified as Janice Brooks. The nurse glanced at the file, her expression shifting slightly. She's still here, she said softly. But she doesn't speak much. Memory comes and goes. Benjamin's heart pounded. Can I see her? The nurse nodded and led them down a long corridor. As they walked, Benjamin's thoughts raced. What if she remembers? What if she knows where Kayla is? They reached a small room at the end of the hall. The door was half open. Inside, a woman sat by the window, sunlight spilling across her thin frame. She was humming faintly, staring out at the trees. Benjamin's breath caught. The woman from the photo. Janice? He said softly. She turned slowly, her eyes distant, searching his face. For a moment, recognition flickered, then faded. I know you, she whispered. You were there. Benjamin took a step closer. Where? She frowned, eyes clouded. The place with the white walls, the children, the man in the gray suit. Benjamin felt the room spin slightly. Done? He said under his breath. Janice looked down at her hands. He took her from me, she whispered. Said she belonged to him now. Benjamin's voice broke. Kayla? Tears filled her eyes. My little girl, she cried for me, and I couldn't reach her. Benjamin knelt beside her, emotion raw in his voice. I'll bring her back, Janice. I promise. Janice blinked, her gaze drifting again. He said you would come, she murmured. Said you'd finally remember what you did. Benjamin froze. What I did? Her eyes met his again, sharp this time, clear for just a heartbeat. You were there when it started. Benjamin's pulse thundered in his ears. Janice, he whispered. What do you mean I was there? But the clarity was gone. Her gaze drifted away once more. She began to hum softly again, rocking slightly in her chair. Rick watched silently from the doorway. Benjamin stood slowly, staring at her, a chill running through his veins. Had Dunn told the truth? Had he really been part of this from the beginning, and simply forgotten his role in it? The drive back from the hospital was silent. Rain fell in thin, icy streaks against the windshield, painting the city in blurred reflections. Rick kept his hands tight on the steering wheel, glancing occasionally at Benjamin, who hadn't spoken since they left Janice's room. She had called him the man who was there when it started. The words echoed in his mind over and over. When it started. What did she mean? He stared at his reflection in the car window, the face of a man who no longer recognized himself. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like the billionaire everyone admired. He felt like a stranger living inside his own skin. Back in New York, Benjamin walked straight into his study. The city lights outside blinked faintly through the rain, casting shifting patterns across the walls. He opened the old folders again, scanning donation records, contracts, and press clippings. The smiling face of Gerald Dunn kept appearing, beside his own. A partnership announcement. A press release for Hopewell Care Foundation. A vision for a better tomorrow. The tagline burned his eyes. Buried at the bottom of one of the press articles was a photo from the ribbon-cutting event. Dunn stood proudly beside Benjamin, scissors in hand. And behind them, a group of children. Among them, a little girl with big brown eyes clutching a stuffed rabbit. Kayla. Benjamin's breath caught. He leaned closer. It was her, years younger, maybe 5 at the time. Dear God, he whispered. Rick entered quietly behind him. What did you find? Benjamin turned the photo around. She was there. At the opening ceremony. Rick frowned. That means she was already in Dunn's care. Benjamin nodded, voice trembling. She's been trapped in his world since day one. And I helped put her there. Rick hesitated. Ben, you didn't know. That excuse doesn't help her now, Benjamin said sharply. It doesn't change what happened. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. I've spent years building a world where my money solves everything. But now it's my money that caused this. The guilt, it's eating me alive. Rick studied him. Then stop letting it eat you. Do something about it. Benjamin stopped pacing. Slowly he looked up. You're right. He took a long breath. No more sitting behind walls. No more delegating justice to others. This time I end it myself. For the next few days, Benjamin became a man possessed. He barely slept. He canceled all public appearances and shut down communications from his board. Every hour was spent tracing Dunn's network. Old financial trails, abandoned facilities, shell charities, and forged research institutions. The deeper he dug, the more monstrous the web became. Children listed as transferred from one care center to another. Dozens of names, erased from every official record. Benjamin's jaw tightened as he read each one. How many kids did he take? Rick glanced at his screen. Too many. Some were adopted, others relocated. None ever resurfaced. Benjamin's voice was low. Then we find the truth. Every name. Every face. 2 nights later, they gathered in Benjamin's private office. A wall-sized monitor displayed a map, pins scattered across the Northeast. These, Rick said, pointing, are the locations linked to Dunn's shell foundations. Hospitals, clinics, youth centers. Some still active, some abandoned. Benjamin leaned forward. Start with the abandoned ones. If he's hiding, it'll be somewhere familiar, somewhere the world's forgotten. Rick nodded. Already working on it. He hesitated, then said quietly, You sure you're ready for this? You know, once we move, there's no going back. Dunn's not just a criminal, he's got people in high places. Politicians, donors, even cops. You'll be taking on more than one man. Benjamin looked at him, his expression steady. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it because I can't live another day knowing I stood by while this continued. Rick smiled faintly. Then let's bring him down. Later that night, Benjamin sat on the balcony overlooking the city. The air was cold, heavy with mist. He held Kayla's cracked bracelet in his palm, turning it slowly under the light. He thought of her voice, soft, trembling. He said, "You're not who you think you are." He didn't know what done meant yet, but he could feel the truth closing in step by step. He looked out across the skyline and whispered, "Wherever you are, Kayla, hold on." The following morning, Rick burst into his office, adrenaline in his voice. "Ben, we got something." Benjamin stood instantly. "What is it?" Rick threw a file onto the desk. "A location. North Star Development bought an old orphanage site outside Albany under a fake name. No activity for years until last week. Surveillance caught a delivery truck entering at 2 a.m. windows boarded, no sign of staff." Benjamin's pulse quickened. "You think that's where Dunn's hiding?" Rick nodded. "Could be. It fits his pattern." Benjamin didn't hesitate. "Then we go tonight." Rick frowned. "Ben." "No more waiting," Benjamin said firmly. "Every minute we delay, she gets further away." Rick exhaled. "All right. But we're doing this smart. I'll call Monroe, she'll send a team discreetly. No headlines, no leaks." Benjamin nodded, though his eyes stayed fixed on the photo of Kayla on his desk. "Just promise me one thing," he said quietly. "If we find her, she comes home safe. No matter what happens to me." Rick met his gaze. "You're not dying tonight, Ben?" Benjamin gave a faint smile. "I didn't say I was planning to. But I've already lost too much time pretending to be untouchable. That ends now." That night, the wind howled across the empty road leading to Albany. The orphanage stood at the edge of a wooded area. Massive, silent, its windows dark. Rick parked a short distance away and killed the lights. "You sure about this?" Benjamin nodded. "He won't see me as a threat. That's his mistake." They stepped out into the cold. The crunch of gravel beneath their feet was the only sound. Benjamin's flashlight swept across the building's facade. Faded paint, shattered glass, and a sign half buried in the weeds. Hopewell Children's Refuge. The name alone sent a chill through him. Rick scanned the perimeter. "I'll check the back. You go around the left." Benjamin nodded and moved quietly along the side wall. The air smelled faintly of chemicals and old decay. He reached a rusted service door and pushed it open. Inside, the darkness swallowed him whole. The beam of his flashlight cut through layers of dust and forgotten memories. Rows of rusted beds lined the corridor, children's drawings still taped to the walls. Faded rainbows, stick figures, scribbles of names. He paused at one of them. In shaky letters it read, "Kayla B." Benjamin's throat tightened. "Kayla," he whispered. A sound echoed in the distance, a faint metallic clang. He turned sharply, raising his light. The beam landed on something moving at the far end of the hall, a flicker of a shadow slipping through a door. "Rick," Benjamin whispered into his radio. "Someone's here." Rick's voice crackled back. "Copy. I'm 2 minutes out. Wait for me." But Benjamin didn't wait. He moved toward the door, every nerve on edge. When he reached it, he pushed it open slowly, the hinges groaning like an old wound reopening. The room beyond was empty except for a single chair in the center, and on it, a tablet screen glowing faintly. He stepped closer. On the screen was a paused video. The first frame showed Kayla sitting on the floor hugging Bunny. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. Benjamin's heart stopped. He pressed play. Kayla's voice trembled. "He said you don't remember him. But he remembers you." She looked off screen, flinching slightly. He said you were there the first day they came for us. Benjamin's vision blurred. What? He whispered. On the screen, Dunn's voice answered from the shadows. Tell him, Kayla. Tell him who signed the first contract that made this place possible. Kayla looked down, silent. Benjamin froze. The camera shifted slightly, showing a blurry document on the table beside her. He recognized the signature instantly. His own. Benjamin staggered back, the tablet slipping from his hands. The truth crashed over him like a tidal wave. He had been there. He had signed the papers that gave Dunn his start. All this time he'd been fighting a monster he helped create. And somewhere in the darkness, Dunn's voice echoed through hidden speakers. Welcome home, Benjamin. Ready to finish what you started? Benjamin stood frozen, his breath shallow in the cold air of the abandoned orphanage. The sound of Dunn's voice echoing through the hidden speakers felt like a ghost whispering through the walls. Welcome home, Benjamin. Ready to finish what you started? The words slithered into his mind like poison. He gripped the edge of the chair, forcing himself to steady his breath. Show yourself, he shouted, his voice bouncing off the decaying walls. No answer came. Only the faint hum of electricity somewhere deeper inside the building. Then a slow clap echoed through the corridor. Clap, clap, clap. Benjamin turned sharply toward the doorway, and there he was. Gerald Dunn. He looked older, thinner, but his smile hadn't changed. It was the same smirk Benjamin remembered from charity galas years ago, polished, confident, deceitful. Benjamin Callahan, Dunn said, stepping into the light. The savior of children. The philanthropist who funds what he doesn't understand. Benjamin's fists clenched. You're a disgrace, Dunn. You exploited innocent lives. You destroyed families. Dunn tilted his head. And who built the empire that made it all possible? Benjamin's jaw tightened. Don't twist this. I didn't know what you were doing. Dunn's grin widened. But you signed everything I needed. Every permit. Every check. Every promise of silence. You just didn't care to read the fine print. The accusation hit harder than any punch. Benjamin stepped closer, his voice trembling with anger. You're lying. I would never fund something like this knowingly. Dunn chuckled softly. Oh, Benjamin. You didn't need to know. You just needed to look the other way. You were too busy chasing headlines, polishing your image, pretending to be the good man your father never was. Benjamin froze. What did you just say? Dunn's expression darkened. You and I aren't so different. I knew your father, you know. Charles Callahan, the man who believed money could buy redemption. He funded orphanages just like this one. Only difference is he made sure his name was erased from every record before he died. Benjamin's stomach dropped. You're lying. My father, he never. Dunn interrupted coldly. Your father built the first care home I ever managed. He called it a rehabilitation center for neglected children. But you know what it really was, Benjamin? A testing ground. For control. For manipulation. For profit. Benjamin shook his head slowly. No. I won't believe that. Dunn stepped closer, his eyes glinting with malice. Oh, but you should. You're the son of the man who started this. And you became his perfect heir. The respectable face of a corrupt legacy. The air in the room grew colder. Benjamin could feel his pulse hammering in his ears. If you think guilt will break me, you're wrong. You used my trust, you hurt children, and you're going to pay for it. Dunn smiled faintly, still pretending to be the hero. Tell me, do you think Kayla sees you that way? When she finds out who you really are? Benjamin's voice cracked. You leave her out of this. Dunn chuckled. I can't. She's the key to everything. Benjamin narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? Dunn took a slow breath, savoring the moment. She's not just another orphan, Benjamin. She's proof, living, breathing proof, of what your father's empire created. That child was born in one of his facilities. Her mother, Janice Brooks, was part of a program your father sponsored before his death. You see now? You didn't just inherit his fortune. You inherited his sins. Benjamin felt his chest tighten. You're lying? Dunn snapped his fingers. A door creaked open at the back of the hall. Two men appeared, dragging a small metal case. They placed it on the table beside Dunn. He flipped it open and pulled out a stack of old files. Government letters, contracts, black and white photographs. Benjamin recognized the letterhead. Callahan Industries. Look for yourself, Dunn said, pushing the files toward him. Your father's name is on every page. Benjamin flipped through them with trembling hands. Project titles, legal jargon, and signatures blurred before his eyes. He could barely breathe. This can't be real, he muttered. My father would never. Oh, it's real, Dunn interrupted. And now it's your legacy to clean up. How poetic, isn't it? The billionaire's redemption story, except this time, there's no redemption. Just bloodlines. Benjamin slammed the folder shut and glared at him. You think I'm going to let you twist history to justify your crimes? No. This ends tonight. Dunn smirked. You're too late, Benjamin. It's already begun again. Before Benjamin could respond, a sudden loud bang echoed from somewhere in the building. Dunn turned toward the sound calmly. Ah, seems your friend Rick has arrived. Benjamin lunged forward, but Dunn raised a hand. One more step and you'll regret it. A small light on the ceiling blinked red, a hidden security sensor. Benjamin froze. Dunn smiled thinly. You didn't really think I'd meet you here without precautions, did you? This place is wired. Every hallway. Every room. You're standing in the middle of my proof and my leverage. Leverage? Benjamin demanded. Dunn leaned closer, his voice a whisper. If anything happens to me tonight, the files you're holding will be sent to every major news outlet in the country. Callahan Industries will burn. Your name, your father's name, erased. Along with any chance you had of saving that girl. Benjamin's jaw tightened. You won't get away with this. Dunn shrugged. I already have. He turned to leave, but Benjamin grabbed his arm. You're done running, Dunn? For a brief moment, the old man's calm cracked. You still don't understand, do you? You can't destroy me without destroying yourself. Benjamin didn't let go. Maybe that's a price I'm finally ready to pay. Dunn's eyes narrowed. Then I suppose we'll both go down together. A piercing alarm blared suddenly, loud, shrill, echoing through every corridor. Red lights flashed across the walls. Smoke began to seep from the vents. Rick's voice shouted from the hallway, Ben. The place is rigged. We have to move. Benjamin's grip loosened. Dunn smiled one last time. Goodbye, Benjamin. See you in the ashes. He slipped free and disappeared into the smoke-filled hall before Benjamin could react. Rick grabbed Benjamin's arm. We have to go now. The files? Benjamin shouted. We can't lose them. Rick yanked the folder from the table. Got them. Move. They ran through the corridor as the fire alarms wailed. Flames began licking the walls, spreading fast. Benjamin stumbled once, coughing from the smoke. Rick pulled him toward the exit. Behind them, the orphanage, the house of secrets, began to collapse. They burst out into the cold night air just as an explosion rocked the building. Debris rained across the ground. Benjamin turned, watching as the structure that held his past burned to the ground. Rick looked at him. You okay? Benjamin nodded faintly, staring into the flames. No. But I will be. He looked at the folder clutched in Rick's hands. Whatever truth is in there, we find it, we face it, and we end this, for good. As fire trucks screamed toward the scene, Benjamin's phone buzzed with a new message. It was a video file. No sender. He opened it. Kayla's voice came through the speaker, trembling, afraid. He said he's coming for you next, Mr. Callahan. And he said, you already know why. Benjamin's blood ran cold. He looked toward the burning building and whispered, Dunn's not finished. Not yet. Morning came wrapped in smoke and silence. From the window of the temporary safe house, Benjamin watched as gray light crept across the skyline. The news had already broken. Abandoned orphanage explodes outside Albany, links to billionaire philanthropist under investigation. His name was back in the headlines, but this time not for his business or his charities. This time it was for something darker. Rick entered the room holding 2 coffees. He looked exhausted, soot smudged across his jacket. "It's everywhere," he said quietly, handing Benjamin a cup. "Every channel. Every paper." Benjamin didn't take it. He just stared out the window, his mind replaying the fire. Dunn's grin fading into smoke, Kayla's trembling voice from the video. "He said he's coming for you next." "What's in the folder?" Benjamin finally asked. Rick set his coffee down and opened the battered file they'd saved from the fire. Inside were stacks of documents, contracts, emails, and photos. The deeper they read, the worse it became. Corporate ledgers showing money funneled through fake charities. Medical research documents linked to behavioral testing on minors. And worst of all, lists of children's names marked reassigned or transferred. Benjamin felt his throat tighten. These poor kids, how many of them are still missing? Rick shook his head slowly. Dozens. Maybe more. Benjamin leaned back, pressing a hand against his forehead. "He built a network right under my nose, and I funded half of it." "Not knowingly," Rick said. "You're not the monster here. Dunn is." Benjamin looked up at him, eyes hollow. "Tell that to the world." By noon the story was viral. Dunn had released a portion of the files online, selectively edited to make Benjamin look complicit. Talk shows, journalists, and social media tore him apart. Billionaire's philanthropy built on lies. The Callahan Foundation exposed? How many children paid the price for his fortune? The pressure was suffocating. His board demanded statements. Sponsors withdrew funding. Reporters camped outside his apartment building. Benjamin shut it all out. He didn't care about his reputation, not anymore. He cared about Kayla and about the truth. Rick walked in carrying a tablet. "I traced one of Dunn's shell companies, Haven West Logistics. It's still active. Warehouse in New Jersey." Benjamin straightened. "What's inside?" "Hard to say. Could be storage, could be something worse." "But listen," Rick hesitated. "If Dunn's still alive, that's where he'll regroup. You've hit his name and his network. He'll want to protect what's left." Benjamin stood. "Then that's where I'm going." Rick frowned. "You're under investigation, Ben. If the media catches you sneaking into another one of his facilities, you'll be finished." Benjamin looked him in the eye. "If we don't act now, more children could vanish. I'd rather lose everything than live knowing I stayed silent again." That evening they drove through the rain toward Newark. The streets were slick, streetlights reflecting off puddles like shards of broken glass. The warehouse was massive, fenced off, and guarded by a pair of unmarked vans. Benjamin peered through binoculars. Men in plain clothes stood near the doors wearing earpieces. Rick muttered, "Definitely not just storage." Benjamin nodded. "How do we get in?" Rick smirked. "You forget who I used to work for? Give me 5 minutes." He moved toward a side gate, crouched near a panel, and with a few quick motions the security lock clicked open. "After you, boss." They slipped inside. The air smelled of oil and damp wood. A faint humming echoed from somewhere deep in the building. Benjamin moved carefully, his flashlight cutting through the dark aisles stacked with crates. Most were labeled with fake company names. Medical supplies, relief goods, educational tools. He opened one. Inside were small tablets and folders filled with data logs, case numbers, blood samples, child IDs. His stomach turned. "This isn't medical aid. It's evidence." Rick's voice was low. Dunn was running human trials, psychological conditioning programs. These kids were part of it. Benjamin clenched his fists. "We're shutting this down right now." They spent the next hour collecting files, snapping photos, recording video proof. But just as they reached the last aisle, a sharp metallic sound echoed, the warehouse door creaking open. Voices followed. "Sweep every level. He'll come back for the data." Benjamin's pulse quickened. He and Rick ducked behind a stack of crates. 2 men entered, flashlights slicing through the dark. One of them spoke into a radio. "Package secure. No sign of Dunn yet." Benjamin whispered, "They're looking for him too." Rick nodded. "Looks like Dunn's running from everyone now." The men moved closer. Benjamin grabbed a metal pipe from the floor, holding it tight. Rick raised a finger to his lips. Wait. As one guard turned the corner, Rick struck, knocking the flashlight from his hand and tackling him to the ground. The other turned, shouting, but Benjamin stepped out and hit him square in the shoulder with the pipe. The man fell with a grunt. They tied the guards with cable ties and checked their IDs. Private contractors. Paid by North Star Holdings, another of Dunn's dummy fronts. Benjamin's phone buzzed. A text message flashed on the screen. Leave the files. Walk away. She lives. Attached was a photo. Kayla sitting on a bed, tears in her eyes. A timestamp from less than an hour ago. Benjamin's hand trembled. He has her. Rick looked at the image. He's baiting you. Benjamin's voice broke. I don't care. I'm going. Rick grabbed his arm. That's what he wants. He's still 3 steps ahead. Benjamin cut him off. And I don't care. If there's a chance she's still alive, I'll take it. Rick exhaled sharply. Then I'm coming with you. The next day, the FBI stormed the Newark warehouse based on the anonymous evidence Benjamin had sent overnight. Agents discovered hidden server rooms, fake adoption documents, and trafficking records spanning over a decade. News broke again. Federal investigation exposes child exploitation ring linked to Gerald Dunn. Callahan Foundation cleared of direct involvement. Billionaire whistleblower aids FBI. Benjamin's name began shifting in the media, from villain to hero, but he didn't care about headlines. All he could think of was Kayla's photo. He replayed it over and over, zooming in on small details, the patterned wallpaper, the dim lamp, the reflection in the window. Rick cross-referenced it with every location tied to Dunn's properties. Then one match popped up. A rural motel outside Buffalo. Rick turned the laptop toward him. It's the same wallpaper. Same layout. That's where she is. Benjamin's eyes hardened. Then that's where we go. That night, as they prepared to leave, Benjamin received another text. You can't erase blood, Benjamin. She knows the truth now. His heart sank. He typed back, if you hurt her, I swear. A reply appeared instantly. I don't hurt family. Benjamin froze. What does that mean? Rick frowned. What if Dunn's not talking about you? Benjamin stared at the screen, a chill crawling down his spine. She knows the truth now. What truth? He looked out the window into the dark, the weight of the past pressing against his chest like a storm ready to break. Rick's phone buzzed, a call from one of his FBI contacts. Rick, the agent said breathlessly, we found something in the warehouse archives. You'd better tell Callahan, it's about the girl. What about her? Rick demanded. The agent hesitated. She's not who he thinks she is. The motel was quiet when they arrived. A dim sign flickered in the cold wind, the word vacancy struggling to stay lit. It was past midnight, the highway nearly empty. Benjamin sat in the passenger seat, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the glowing window in the far corner of the motel. That was the room the FBI had traced from the photo. Rick parked behind an old pickup truck. If Dunn's here, we can't go in blind, he said. We wait for backup. Benjamin shook his head. I'm not waiting another second. He has her. And if she's hurt. Ben, Rick cut in firmly. Think. This man has anticipated every move you've made. One wrong step and we could lose her again or worse. Benjamin gripped the door handle but hesitated. He knew Rick was right. The air felt heavy like the night itself was warning them. They waited in silence, watching the motel's front office through the windshield. The night clerk dozed behind the counter. No movement, no sound, just the hum of the neon light. Then a curtain in the far corner flickered. A faint silhouette appeared, small, hunched, and trembling. Benjamin's breath caught. Kayla. Rick grabbed his arm. Careful. But Benjamin was already out of the car. He crossed the parking lot, every step echoing against the wet asphalt. He reached the door and knocked softly. Kayla, he whispered. It's me. It's Mr. Callahan. No answer. He tried again. You're safe now. I promise. The door creaked open slightly. A small face peeked through, Kayla's eyes wide, filled with fear and confusion. Mr. Callahan? She whispered. Benjamin smiled softly, relief flooding his voice. It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here now. But before he could step forward, Kayla stepped back, shaking her head. He said not to trust you. Benjamin froze. What? He said you only help people so they forget what you did, she said, her voice trembling. He said you're like him. Benjamin felt something twist deep inside his chest. No, Kayla. That's not true. Then why did you sign those papers? She asked, tears filling her eyes. He showed me. He said you helped build the place where they hurt us. Benjamin's throat went dry. He lowered himself to her level, speaking gently. Kayla, listen to me. I didn't know. I swear to you, if I could undo everything he did, I would. She hugged Bunny tighter. He said you would say that. Before Benjamin could respond, the sound of an approaching car broke through the night. Headlights swept across the lot. Rick stepped out of the shadows, motioning for Benjamin to move aside. Get her back inside, Rick whispered. We're not alone. Benjamin turned, just in time to see a black SUV pull into the lot. Two men stepped out, moving quickly toward the office. Rick drew his weapon. Dunn's people. Kayla gasped softly and hid behind Benjamin. He turned to her. Do you trust me just a little? She nodded hesitantly. Then stay behind me. A tense silence filled the night. The two men entered the office, speaking briefly to the clerk, who pointed toward Kayla's room. Benjamin motioned to Rick. We end this here. Rick nodded. They split. Benjamin moved toward the side window while Rick circled behind the building. Inside the office, one of the men drew a gun and began walking down the hall. The other followed with a flashlight. Benjamin waited until they were close, then kicked the door open. The impact startled the men. One fired blindly, a bullet tearing into the doorframe. Rick fired once in response, striking the man's arm. He dropped his weapon, shouting in pain. Benjamin rushed forward, slamming the other against the wall. Where is Dunn? He demanded. The man spat blood, sneering. He's gone. Left hours ago. Where? Benjamin shouted. The man laughed bitterly. Doesn't matter. He's already won. Benjamin's grip tightened. Not yet. Rick cuffed the injured man, while Kayla clung to Bunny, crying softly in the corner. When it was over, Benjamin crouched beside her. You're safe now, sweetheart. I promise. She looked up at him, her face streaked with tears. He said you'd say that too. The words cut deep, deeper than he expected. Hours later, in the safety of an FBI safe house, Kayla sat quietly wrapped in a blanket. She hadn't spoken since they left the motel. An agent brought in cocoa for her, but she just stared into it, lost in her thoughts. Benjamin stood near the window, exhausted. Rick entered with a folder. Got the report, he said. Those men were part of Dunn's logistics team. He's still alive, but he's running out of places to hide. Benjamin nodded but didn't respond. His mind was somewhere else. Rick placed the folder on the table. There's something else you need to see. Inside were birth records, medical files, and a photograph, faded but clear enough to recognize the child. It was Kayla. Benjamin frowned. What am I looking at? Rick hesitated. Ben, she's not an orphan. Benjamin looked up sharply. What? Her mother, Janice Brooks, is still alive. Benjamin froze. That's impossible. Dunn said. Dunn lied, Rick said quietly. She was taken to a psychiatric hospital after trying to expose him. She lost her memory after an accident. The hospital listed her as a Jane Doe until we matched the DNA records from Kayla's file. Benjamin stared at the photograph. Janice, young and smiling, holding a baby in her arms. She's been in New Jersey State Hospital for 6 years, Rick continued. She never stopped asking about her daughter. She just didn't know who she was asking for. Benjamin's throat tightened. We have to take Kayla there. Rick nodded. I'll make the arrangements. The next morning, Benjamin sat with Kayla in the car as they drove toward the hospital. She watched raindrops slide down the window, her small hands twisting Bunny's ears. After a long silence, she whispered, Was he telling the truth? About you? Benjamin took a deep breath. He was telling parts of it. The part where I signed papers, yes. I did. But I didn't know they were hurting anyone, Kayla. I thought I was helping. She turned toward him. Then why do you look so sad? He smiled weakly. Because sometimes good people do the wrong thing without realizing it. And sometimes when they finally see what they've done, they have to spend the rest of their life making it right. Kayla looked thoughtful. Like saying sorry? Benjamin nodded. Yes, but not just with words. with actions. She reached out and took his hand, small, fragile, but full of unexpected strength. Then maybe you can make it right. For me. Benjamin's chest tightened. That's exactly what I plan to do. When they reached the hospital, the nurse led them down a long corridor. The walls were white, the air quiet and heavy. At the end of the hall, behind a glass door, sat a woman with soft curls and distant eyes, painting tiny flowers on a sheet of paper. Janice Brooks, the nurse said softly. Kayla froze. Her grip on Benjamin's hand tightened. Benjamin knelt beside her. It's okay. Go to her. Kayla hesitated, then slowly stepped forward. The woman looked up, confused at first, then something flickered in her eyes. Recognition. Kayla, she whispered. The little girl's lip quivered. Mommy? Janice stood, trembling, tears flooding her eyes. Oh my God, my baby. Kayla ran into her arms, sobbing. Janice held her tight, crying into her daughter's hair. Benjamin turned away, blinking hard against the emotion rising in his chest. For the first time, the ghosts of his past felt lighter, as if one of the many broken pieces of his life had found its place again. Rick stepped up beside him, holding a small envelope. Ben, he said quietly, you need to see this. Benjamin opened it. Inside was a copy of a letter written years ago. It was signed by Charles Callahan, his father. The words read, If anything happens to me, protect the Brooks girl. She's not just part of the project, she's family. Benjamin's hand trembled. Family? He whispered. Rick nodded slowly. There's something your father never told you. Benjamin stared at the letter, his heart pounding. What did my father do? The wind rattled the window panes of Benjamin Callahan's penthouse. The skyline glowed outside, the heart of New York City pulsing with life. Inside, though, silence hung heavy. It had been 2 weeks since the reunion at the hospital. 2 weeks since Kayla had found her mother. 2 weeks since Benjamin learned that somehow, his late father was entangled in everything. And in those 2 weeks, Kayla hadn't slept through a single night. Each evening started the same. She would have dinner quietly, sitting on the high stool across from Benjamin, nibbling her food without a word. She would smile faintly when Maria, the housekeeper, made her warm cocoa, but as soon as darkness fell, her energy dimmed. By midnight, she would begin to stir, whispering, crying softly, sometimes screaming until her throat gave out. Tonight was no different. Benjamin stood outside her room, his hand resting on the doorframe. From inside, he could hear the muffled sound of her sobbing. He knocked gently. Kayla? Pause. Then a weak, trembling voice. I can't sleep, Mr. Callahan. He opened the door slowly. The room was dimly lit, the soft glow of a nightlight casting shadows across the floor. Kayla sat upright in bed, clutching Bunny, her eyes wide and wet. I dream about the dark place, she whispered. The one with the red door. Every night. Benjamin sat at the edge of her bed. The same dream. She nodded. They said the red door meant bad things were coming. When I hear it slam, I wake up. Benjamin's chest tightened. He wanted to tell her it wasn't real, that dreams couldn't hurt her, but he'd learned enough to know that wasn't true. The mind could trap you in ways no wall ever could. He reached out his hand. You want me to stay here a while? She hesitated, then nodded. He leaned back against the headboard as she curled beside him, Bunny tucked between them. Her breathing steadied. He hummed softly, an old tune his mother used to sing. After a while, her voice broke the silence. Did you ever have bad dreams, Mr. Callahan? He smiled faintly. When I was a boy, yes. I used to dream I was lost in the snow. I'd shout for my father, but he never came. She looked up at him. Did the dream ever stop? He paused. No. I just learned to stop waiting for him. Kayla frowned. Maybe you should have kept calling. He looked down at her, this tiny, brave soul who had seen more horror than most adults could bear, and realized she might be right. In the following days, Benjamin made quiet changes to his routine. He began coming home earlier from work. He no longer spent evenings lost in business calls or scrolling through reports. Instead, he'd cook simple meals with Maria and help Kayla with her drawing. She liked to draw flowers, wild, bright ones that filled the page. When he asked why, she said, because flowers are brave. They grow even when the world's too cold. It was the kind of answer that lingered long after she said it. Benjamin found himself reflecting on his own life. The boardrooms, the endless zeros, the quiet loneliness that had followed him for years. For the first time, his home didn't feel empty. But the nights still came with shadows. Sometimes he'd wake to find Kayla sitting by the window, staring out at the city lights. "What are you thinking about?" he'd ask. "About Mommy," she'd whisper. "And about him." Benjamin would kneel beside her. "You don't have to be afraid anymore." But she'd shake her head. "He said he'll find me. He said we can't hide forever." The fear in her eyes was real. And Benjamin knew Dunn was still out there. Rick had been searching, but every trail led to dead ends, false leads, shell companies, foreign accounts. Dunn was a ghost, slipping through every net. Benjamin hated feeling powerless. He had built an empire on control, on strategy, on precision. But none of that meant anything now. The only thing that mattered sat across the hall, clutching a stuffed rabbit, fighting to sleep. One night, while reviewing old documents, Benjamin stumbled upon another letter from his father. It was dated a few months before Charles Callahan's death. "There are things I've done that you'll never forgive, Benjamin. But I did them to protect someone, a girl and her mother. If you ever find them, keep them safe. It's the only way I can make peace with what I allowed." Benjamin stared at the letter, his pulse quickening. His father knew about Dunn. He knew about Janice and Kayla. And if he'd known, maybe he'd also been trying to stop it. Benjamin's mind raced. If Charles had funded Dunn's first shelter, maybe he'd left clues, buried in company files or old property records. He stayed up all night searching through archives, tracing the paper trail backward. By dawn, his eyes were red, but he'd found something. A hidden property. Registered under an alias, Margaret's Promise Foundation. An address in Queens. He folded the paper carefully, heart pounding. It wasn't just about Dunn anymore. It was about uncovering the truth his father had died protecting. The next morning, Kayla found him asleep at his desk. She tiptoed in, set Bunny beside his arm, and whispered, "Good morning." He stirred, smiling groggily. "You're up early." "I made you breakfast," she said proudly. Maria helped. He looked at the tray, toast slightly burnt, orange juice half spilled, and laughed. "It's perfect." She giggled, then noticed the map spread out across the desk. "What's that?" "Just some old papers," he said, quickly folding it up. She tilted her head. "You're hiding something." Benjamin smiled. "You're very observant." "I'm brave too," she said with a grin. "So if you're going somewhere, I want to come." He hesitated. "It's not safe, Kayla." "Then you shouldn't go alone," she said softly. He looked into her eyes, full of quiet courage, and for a moment he saw his younger self reflected back. Maybe this was what it meant to have a family. Not by blood but by choice. That night, the city thundered with rain. Benjamin sat in the living room, reading through files by lamplight. Kayla had finally fallen asleep, or so he thought. When he checked on her hours later, her bed was empty. His heart dropped. He called out, "Kayla?" No answer. He searched the hallway, then the kitchen. Nothing. Panic rose in his chest until he noticed the front door slightly open, the security latch undone. He rushed to the lobby, shouting her name. Then he saw her, standing just outside under the awning, barefoot, drenched in rain, staring into the night. He ran to her, wrapping his coat around her shoulders. "Kayla, what are you doing out here?" Tears streamed down her face. "I saw him." Benjamin froze. "Who?" "The man with the red door," she whispered. "He was across the street, watching." Benjamin turned. The street was empty, rain falling in sheets. No one there. But deep down he knew she wasn't imagining it. Somewhere out there, Dunn was still pulling strings. He lifted her into his arms, her small frame shivering against his chest. "It's okay," he whispered. "I won't let anyone hurt you again." As he carried her back upstairs, thunder rumbled over the city, echoing like a warning. Kayla drifted off in his arms, finally at peace. But Benjamin didn't sleep that night. He stood by the window until dawn, watching the rain fall, waiting for shadows to move. Because deep down he knew, the past wasn't finished with them yet. The next morning Rick called. His voice was grim. "Ben, we found Dunn's car. Abandoned near the Queen's property you mentioned." Benjamin's grip on the phone tightened. "Was he inside?" "No," Rick said. "But there's something else." A child's drawing was taped to the dashboard. Signed, Kayla. Benjamin's blood ran cold. He's sending a message. The morning after the phone call, Benjamin couldn't shake the chill that ran down his spine. Dunn was out there, somewhere, and he was watching. For the first time in years, Benjamin felt something stronger than fear: protectiveness. He wasn't thinking like a businessman anymore. He was thinking like a father. The sun was still low when Kayla padded into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. She wore her oversized bunny slippers, her hair sticking out in every direction. Maria was at the stove, humming softly as she flipped pancakes. When she saw Kayla, she smiled. "Morning, sweetheart. You hungry?" Kayla nodded. "Can I help?" Maria chuckled. "Of course. You can stir the batter." Benjamin watched from the doorway, unseen for a moment. There was something healing in the scene: the warmth of the kitchen, the laughter, the smell of syrup. He thought about how his house used to sound before Kayla came: quiet, mechanical, lifeless. Now it was alive again. When he stepped in, Kayla grinned. "We made breakfast." He smiled. "I can see that." Maria winked. "You better eat before she eats it all." Kayla giggled and poured syrup over her pancakes, a little too much. Benjamin sat down across from her, feeling the warmth spread through his chest. It wasn't the food, it was the feeling of home. After breakfast, they took a walk through Central Park. The air was crisp, the trees beginning to change color. Kayla ran ahead, chasing pigeons, her laughter echoing down the path. Benjamin followed slowly, hands in his pockets, smiling despite the cold. "Mr. Callahan," she called out, spinning around. "If I catch one, can we keep it?" He laughed. "I think pigeons belong to the city. But I could teach it tricks," she insisted. He raised an eyebrow. "Tricks? Yeah. Like sitting still. Or not flying away." Benjamin chuckled. "Sounds like a challenge." Kayla ran back to him, breathless and happy. "You're smiling," she said. "I suppose I am," he admitted. "You should do it more," she said softly. "You look nice when you smile." For a moment, Benjamin couldn't speak. He simply looked at her, this small girl who had endured so much, yet still had light in her eyes, and he felt something shift deep inside him. It wasn't just sympathy anymore. It was love. Pure, unconditional, protective love. Over the next few days, Benjamin began rearranging his life. He called emergency meetings at Callahan Enterprises, not to discuss profits or new ventures, but to redirect funds. $500 million, his personal money, was moved into a new initiative, the Starlight Project. Its mission was simple: to create safe shelters, counseling centers, and education programs for children who had suffered trauma and neglect. When his board members protested, he silenced them with a single statement: "If this company can't stand for something good, then it stands for nothing." He signed every paper himself, without hesitation. Rick stood at the edge of the office, arms crossed. "You're really doing this, huh?" Benjamin nodded. "It's time to fix what we broke." Rick studied him for a moment. "You've changed, Ben." Benjamin looked out the window at the skyline. "No. I'm just finally becoming who I should have been all along." At home, Kayla had started to blossom. She painted again, laughed more, and even slept through some nights. She and Maria baked cookies, built pillow forts, and filled the house with music. But the shadows hadn't disappeared completely. One afternoon, Benjamin found her sitting alone in the library, holding Bunny. He knelt beside her. "What's wrong?" She looked up, her eyes glossy. "Mommy doesn't remember me all the way." Benjamin's heart sank. "She tries," Kayla continued, "but sometimes she looks at me and forgets my name. The doctor said it's from her accident." He gently took her hand. "Sometimes memories take a while to find their way back. But she loves you. You know that, right?" Kayla nodded. "I think so." Then she looked at him curiously. "Did your daddy love you?" Benjamin hesitated. "He did, in his own way." "What way?" He smiled sadly. "The kind that's hard to see until it's too late." She tilted her head. "Then maybe he's proud of you now." Benjamin's throat tightened. "Maybe he is." That night, they sat together on the balcony, the city glowing beneath them. Kayla leaned against him, wrapped in a blanket. "Do you think people can start over?" she asked. Benjamin looked at her. "I think that's all people ever do, start over. Some of us just take longer to figure it out." She smiled sleepily. "I want to start over too." "You already are," he said softly. "And you're doing beautifully." Her eyelids grew heavy, and within minutes she was asleep. Benjamin stayed there long after, watching the skyline, the stars faint but persistent above the city lights. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about losses or regrets. He was thinking about the future. The next morning, as he left for work, Maria handed him an envelope. "Kayla made this for you," she said. Inside was a hand-drawn picture. Benjamin, Kayla, Maria, and Janice, standing under a rainbow. At the bottom, in uneven letters, it read, "My family." Benjamin's eyes stung. He slipped the picture into his briefcase and said quietly, "Thank you." Later that day, Rick burst into his office, his face pale. "Ben, we've got a problem." Benjamin straightened. "What kind?" Rick set down a tablet. On the screen was a still image from a traffic camera, a man in a dark coat watching from across the street. "Recognize him?" Rick asked. Benjamin's stomach dropped. "Done." Rick nodded grimly. "He's back in New York. And he's not hiding anymore." Benjamin felt the warmth from earlier drain away, replaced by cold determination. "Where was this taken?" he demanded. "2 blocks from the hospital where Janice is recovering." Benjamin's jaw clenched. "Then he's going after her." Rick gave a slow nod. "And possibly Kayla." Benjamin turned toward the window, watching the city below, alive, beautiful, and dangerous. He wasn't the same man he was months ago. He wasn't running from guilt anymore. He was standing for something. He reached for his coat. "We end this, Rick. For good." Rick grabbed his arm. "Ben, wait. There's something else." He handed over a file, an old one sealed with the Callahan Company logo. "This was buried in your father's archives," Rick said. "It's about done, and it's signed by both your father and Janice Brooks." Benjamin stared at the signature, disbelief flashing in his eyes. "She knew my father?" Rick nodded. "Looks like it." Benjamin exhaled sharply, realization dawning like a storm. "Then this story didn't start with me." The city was drenched in evening rain when Benjamin's car pulled up to the old Callahan Archives building in Lower Manhattan. The streets glistened under the streetlights, and thunder rolled faintly in the distance, as if the sky itself knew that something buried was about to be unearthed. He and Rick stepped out, their coats drawn tight against the chill. The building loomed above them, stone, silent, and filled with decades of secrets. Rick held up a keycard. "You sure you want to do this yourself?" Benjamin nodded. "If there are answers in there, I need to be the one who finds them." They entered. Dust floated in the beam of Rick's flashlight. The air smelled of age and forgotten history. At the far end of the hallway was a steel door marked Private Estate Files, Callahan Family Only. Benjamin's pulse quickened as he swiped his own card. The door unlocked with a heavy click. Inside were shelves upon shelves of boxes, neatly labeled. Rick handed him a folder, the one they'd found in the company vault. "This is where it started," Rick said. Benjamin opened it. The first page was a contract dated 15 years ago. His father's signature was clear at the bottom, alongside another name, Janice Brooks. He frowned. "What was she doing in business with my father?" Rick shrugged. "Maybe not business. Keep reading." The next document was a grant proposal for something called the Starlight Initiative. Benjamin's eyes widened. "That's the name I gave my new project." "Coincidence?" Rick asked. Benjamin shook his head. "No. My father named it first." He flipped through the pages. The proposal described an organization meant to provide care for single mothers and children in need. But halfway through, the handwriting changed. Notes scribbled in the margins, angry, desperate. "Funding pulled. Dunn took control. Threatened Janice. Can't protect them much longer." Benjamin's throat went dry. "My father tried to stop him." Rick leaned closer. "And failed." Benjamin looked at the next page, a hospital report. It listed Janice Brooks as injured in a vehicular accident 3 days after his father's death. "Same day as the fire at the old shelter," Rick said quietly. "The one Dunn escaped from." Benjamin exhaled slowly. "So my father and Janice were working together. They tried to protect those children." He stared at the final page, a handwritten letter addressed to him. "Benjamin, if you're reading this, then I couldn't save them. Janice and her daughter are in danger. Dunn is more powerful than you know. Protect the girl. Keep her safe no matter the cost." "Dad." Benjamin's chest tightened. He had spent years resenting his father, believing the man was heartless, only to discover he'd died trying to do the right thing. He closed the file and whispered, "I was wrong about him." Rick placed a hand on his shoulder. "We both were." The next morning, Benjamin visited Janice at the hospital again. The nurses greeted him warmly. He'd been there often, bringing her flowers, reading to her, helping her rebuild fragments of her memory. Janice sat by the window, sketching quietly. She looked better, stronger, more present. "Good morning, Janice," he said softly. She turned, smiling. "Benjamin, you always bring the sun with you." He smiled. "Then it must be working. You're remembering more?" "A little," she said. "I keep seeing flashes, a man and office paperwork. Sometimes I hear someone shouting about closing a place called Hope Haven. I think I used to work there." Benjamin's heart raced. "You did? You and my father?" Janice froze. "Your father?" He handed her a copy of the file. "Charles Callahan. You knew him?" She stared at the photo of Charles for a long time before whispering, "Yes. I remember him now. He helped me once, when Dunn first started changing things. He promised he'd keep us safe." Her eyes filled with tears. "He told me to run if anything ever happened to him. But I didn't. I stayed. And then, the crash." Benjamin leaned forward. "Dunn caused it, didn't he?" Janice looked down. "He wanted the files, the evidence. When I refused to give it to him, he followed me. The last thing I remember is the sound of screeching tires." Her voice trembled. "When I woke up, I couldn't remember my name, or Kayla." Benjamin swallowed hard. "You did everything you could, Janice. None of this is your fault." Janice reached for his hand. "You sound just like your father." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm finally learning from him." Later that day, Benjamin took Janice and Kayla out for lunch, their first time together outside the hospital. They went to a small cafe near Central Park. Kayla ordered hot chocolate with extra marshmallows, and Janice laughed softly, saying it had been her favorite as a girl. For a while, it almost felt normal, like they were a family, like the shadows of the past were fading. But as they walked back to the car, Benjamin noticed a black sedan parked across the street. The same one that had appeared near the hospital days earlier. He tensed. "Rick," he murmured into his earpiece. "It's him. The sedan's back." Rick's voice crackled through. "I've got your location. Stay calm. We're moving in." Benjamin took Kayla's hand, forcing a smile. "Let's get you both home." They got into the car, but Benjamin couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every mirror, every turn, he could feel Dunn's eyes. As they reached the bridge, the car behind them sped up, closing the distance. Rick's voice shouted through the earpiece. "Ben, move. It's him." Benjamin slammed the accelerator. Tires screeched. The sedan swerved beside them, and for a split second, Benjamin saw him. Dunn. His cold eyes locked on Benjamin's before the car fell back, disappearing into traffic. Hours later, back at the penthouse, Benjamin stood by the window, staring down at the city. Rick paced behind him. "He's getting bold," Rick said. "He wants you to know he's watching." Benjamin clenched his fists. "He's taunting me. Or warning you." Benjamin turned. "Then I'll warn him back." Rick frowned. "What do you mean?" Benjamin picked up his phone. "I'm going to the media. I'll expose everything, the fake shelters, the stolen funds, all of it." "That's dangerous, Ben. He won't just hide. He'll fight." Benjamin's expression hardened. "Then let him. I'm done being afraid." The next morning, Benjamin held a press conference. Cameras flashed, reporters swarmed, questions flew. He stood tall, his voice steady. "For too long, men like Gerald Dunn have hidden behind money, power, and lies. I was one of them once, blind, comfortable, and silent. But silence is a form of guilt. So today I'm breaking mine." He announced the full launch of the Starlight Project, dedicated to exposing child exploitation networks and providing safe homes for survivors. The room erupted in applause. But in the crowd, one man didn't clap. He just smiled, a slow, knowing smile before walking away. Done. That night, Benjamin returned home exhausted but proud. Kayla ran to him, hugging him tightly. "You were on TV," she said. "Maria said you were brave." He knelt and hugged her back. "You make me brave, sweetheart." But as he tucked her into bed later, a flicker of unease crossed his mind. Dunn wasn't done, he could feel it. He kissed Kayla's forehead, whispering, "Sleep tight, my girl." Then he stepped into the hallway and froze. The front door was ajar. On the floor lay an envelope. No return address. Just his name, printed neatly, Benjamin Callahan. He tore it open. Inside was a photo, grainy but unmistakable. Janice and Kayla. Taken that afternoon. On the back, a single line in red ink. You took my world. Now I'll take yours. Benjamin stared at the photo, his heart pounding. Rick called just then. Ben, where are you? Home, he said tightly. Get out, Rick snapped. No. Dunn's car just left your building's garage. Benjamin dropped the phone, rushing for Kayla's room. The bed was empty. The window was open. The night air carried the faintest sound of tires screeching away. Kayla, he shouted into the darkness. The night air was sharp against Benjamin's face as he ran down the hallway. His heart pounded so hard it drowned out everything else. The distant wail of a siren, the echo of his shoes on marble, even his own ragged breathing. Kayla, he shouted, his voice breaking. Kayla. He threw open every door, her room, the guest room, the kitchen. Nothing. The window curtains fluttered wildly, letting in the cold Manhattan wind. Rick burst through the front door moments later, gun drawn, face grim. Security footage just cut out 10 minutes ago. He was here. Benjamin spun, eyes wild. Where is she? Rick clenched his jaw. We're tracking the car now. Black sedan, no plates. We'll find her, Ben. But Benjamin was already moving. No. I'll find her. They hit the streets fast. Rick drove while Benjamin stared out the window, gripping Kayla's stuffed rabbit in his hands. The same one she'd carried since the night he found her. The city blurred past, neon lights, rain-slick roads, endless shadows. Every minute felt like an hour. Rick spoke into the comms. We've got an alert from the East River camera. Sedan heading toward the old industrial zone. Benjamin's voice was ice. That's Dunn's territory. The old warehouses by the East River were mostly abandoned, their broken windows glinting like jagged teeth. Rick pulled up behind a stack of shipping containers, killed the lights, and nodded. This is it. Benjamin stepped out into the rain, his breath visible in the cold. Somewhere inside those dark buildings, Kayla was crying for help, and Dunn was waiting. They moved quietly through the shadows until a faint light flickered ahead, a single bulb swinging in the wind above a rusted door. Benjamin pushed it open. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and gasoline. And there, tied to a chair, trembling but alive, was Kayla. Kayla, he called. Her head lifted weakly. Ben? But before he could take a step, Dunn stepped out from behind a stack of crates, a pistol in his hand and that same crooked smile on his face. Well, Dunn drawled. The billionaire who thought he could play hero. Benjamin froze. Let her go, Dunn. It's me you want. Dunn laughed, low and bitter. You really think this is about you? You took everything from me, my money, my network, my freedom. You paraded me like a monster in front of the world. Now it's your turn to lose what you love. Rick appeared behind him, gun raised. Drop it, Dunn. But Dunn didn't flinch. He pressed the gun closer to Kayla's head. One step closer and she's gone. Benjamin's voice cracked. Please. She's just a child. Exactly, Dunn hissed. A child who shouldn't have survived that fire. Your father was supposed to take the fall, not me. But then she showed up, and you found her. So now we finish what was started. Benjamin's mind raced. My father, he was trying to protect Janice. Protect Kayla. Dunn's smirk widened. He failed. They all failed. And that was the moment Rick made his move. A loud crash, the sound of metal falling, echoed from behind. Dunn turned just slightly, startled. It was enough. Rick fired. The shot hit Dunn's shoulder, sending him sprawling. The gun skidded across the floor. Benjamin rushed forward, cutting the ropes that held Kayla. She threw her arms around him, sobbing. I was so scared. It's over, sweetheart, he whispered, holding her close. You're safe now. But Dunn wasn't done. With blood streaming down his arm, he reached for a hidden knife and lunged. Rick shouted, Ben, look out. Benjamin turned just in time. The blade grazed his side before Rick tackled Dunn to the ground, knocking the weapon away. The two men struggled, fists and fury colliding. Finally, Rick landed a hard blow that sent Dunn unconscious. Benjamin staggered, wincing, one hand pressed against his wound. Kayla clung to him, crying. Don't die, Ben. Please don't die. He smiled weakly. Not a chance, kiddo. Minutes later, police sirens wailed in the distance. Rick exhaled. Backup's here. Benjamin nodded, clutching Kayla's hand. Let's go home. As they stepped outside, the first light of dawn broke through the rain clouds. It felt like the city itself was exhaling, the long nightmare finally over. Hours later at the hospital, Benjamin sat beside Janice's bed. She was pale but awake, staring at the news report on the TV. Police confirm capture of Gerald Dunn, head of child exploitation ring. Janice turned to Benjamin, tears in her eyes. You found her. He nodded, voice quiet. She's safe. Dunn won't hurt anyone ever again. Janice trembled. I thought I lost her forever. He reached out, taking her hand. You didn't. You just had to wait for the right moment to find her again. And then from the doorway came a small, hesitant voice. Mom? Janice froze. Slowly she turned, and there stood Kayla, dressed in hospital pajamas, her eyes wide and tear-filled. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Janice whispered, Kayla? Kayla ran to her, and Janice caught her in her arms, sobbing into her daughter's hair. My baby, my beautiful girl. The room filled with quiet tears, the kind that only come from lost souls finding each other again. Benjamin turned away slightly, swallowing hard. It was the moment he'd dreamed of, a family reunited, the nightmare undone. But part of him felt the ache of goodbye. He had saved them, yes, but in doing so he had given them back to each other, and that meant he'd lose the little girl who'd filled the silence in his home. Janice noticed the look on his face. Benjamin, she said softly, you're part of this family now too. Kayla nodded eagerly. You're my hero, Ben. He smiled, eyes glistening. No, sweetheart. You're mine. Days later, Dunn was formally charged. The media hailed Benjamin as a national hero, the billionaire who chose humanity over wealth. But he didn't care about the headlines. What mattered was that Kayla laughed again, that Janice smiled without pain, that the ghosts of the past were finally at peace. Still, late at night, Benjamin often found himself standing by his window, looking out at the city lights. He thought about his father, the man he'd misunderstood for so long, and whispered a quiet thank you. Because in saving Kayla, he had found his own redemption. A week later, while walking through the hospital garden with Janice and Kayla, Benjamin's phone buzzed. A known number. He hesitated before answering. Hello. A familiar, raspy voice replied. You think it's over, Callahan? Benjamin froze. You only cut off one head. The rest are still watching. The line went dead. Benjamin lowered the phone slowly, staring into the distance. Behind him, Kayla laughed, innocent, unaware. But Benjamin's eyes hardened. Then I'll be ready, he whispered. The morning after the call, Benjamin sat in his office overlooking the skyline of New York. The sun was bright, but the world still felt heavy. He hadn't slept. The voice on the phone kept echoing in his mind, you only cut off one head. Rick entered, holding a folder. I had the call traced. Benjamin looked up sharply. And? Rick set the file on the desk. It came from an encrypted network. Offshore. Whoever it was, they're organized and they're watching. Benjamin leaned back, rubbing his temples. So Dunn wasn't acting alone. Rick nodded grimly. He was a front man. Someone bigger was funding his operation, moving money through fake charities, shell corporations, even political donations. Benjamin's stomach turned. How deep does it go? Rick hesitated. Deep enough that if we pull too hard, the whole system might come crashing down. Benjamin stood. Then we pull anyway. Later that afternoon, the city was buzzing. The trial of Gerald Dunn had begun, one of the most anticipated criminal cases in recent New York history. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps. Cameras flashed. Protesters held signs demanding justice for the children. Benjamin arrived quietly, wearing a black suit, no entourage, no publicist. He didn't want glory. He wanted closure. Inside, he sat beside Janice and Kayla, their hands intertwined. The prosecutor, Elena Shaw, nodded at him from across the room, a fierce, sharp-eyed woman who'd built her career on fighting corruption. When Dunn entered, escorted by officers, the room fell silent. His arm was still in a sling, his face pale but defiant. He caught Benjamin's gaze and smirked. The trial began. Elena stood first. Your Honor, this is not just a case of fraud or abuse. This is a case about betrayal, of power, of trust, of humanity. The defendant, Gerald Dunn, used his position to exploit and harm the very children he was meant to protect. She turned toward the defense table. And we have proof. Benjamin was the first witness called. He took the stand, every camera fixed on him. Elena approached. Mr. Callahan, please state your occupation. Businessman, he said softly. Philanthropist now. Can you tell the court how you became involved in this case? He took a breath. I found a child, alone, terrified, and abandoned in an alley. Her name was Kayla. That moment changed everything. As he spoke, his voice cracked. He described finding her, uncovering Dunn's operation, discovering the link to his father, and realizing the hidden crimes beneath the surface of his own empire. Every word carried weight. The room was silent except for the scribbling of pens. When he finished, Elena said, "Thank you, Mr. Callahan." No further questions. The defense attorney rose, adjusting his glasses. Mr. Callahan, you're a billionaire, correct? Yes. So it's fair to say you had every reason to protect your company's image. Isn't it possible your testimony today is part of a narrative to redeem yourself? Benjamin's gaze was steady. Maybe. But redemption doesn't erase truth. It only begins when you face it. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Even the judge seemed moved. Next, Janice took the stand. Her voice trembled at first but grew stronger as she spoke. She recounted her time working under Dunn, the moment she realized his operation was fake, the threats, the night of the crash. When she spoke of losing Kayla, her tears fell freely. I thought I'd never see her again, she said. But somehow, by grace, she found a man who didn't walk away. He could have ignored her like everyone else. But he didn't. She turned toward Benjamin, smiling through tears. Because of him, my daughter is alive. The room erupted in applause before the judge restored order. Dunn glared at them both, muttering something to his lawyer. After weeks of testimony and evidence, the jury returned their verdict. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom gasped. Janice covered her mouth. Kayla clung to her mother's side. As officers led Dunn away, he turned his head and spat bitterly. You think you've won, Callahan? There are others like me. You can't save them all. Benjamin met his gaze calmly. Maybe not. But I'll save the next one. And the one after that. Until there's no one left for you to hide behind. Dunn's face twisted with rage as he was dragged out. Outside the courthouse, the media swarmed. Microphones, cameras, questions flying from every direction. Mr. Callahan, how does it feel to see justice served? He paused, choosing his words carefully. Justice isn't about punishment. It's about truth. And truth doesn't belong to the powerful. It belongs to everyone who's been silenced. His words spread across news outlets within hours. Social media exploded. Hashtags like #CallahanForChange and #StarlightProject trended worldwide. People from across the country began donating to his foundation. Survivors shared their stories. Communities united around the cause. For the first time, Benjamin felt something he hadn't in years: peace. But the victory came with shadows. That night, as Benjamin walked into his penthouse, he found Rick waiting with a grim expression. You were right, Rick said. Dunn wasn't lying. We found encrypted documents in his laptop, offshore accounts, communications with unnamed donors. Someone high up kept this machine running. Benjamin frowned. How high up? Rick hesitated. Politicians, executives, even a few charity heads. He wasn't just a monster, he was a businessman working for monsters. Benjamin stared out at the skyline. Then we keep digging. Rick smiled faintly. That's what I figured you'd say. Later that night, Benjamin stood by the window again. Below, the city shimmered, vibrant, alive, imperfect but worth saving. Behind him, Kayla appeared in her pajamas, holding her rabbit. You're thinking again, she said sleepily. He smiled, lifting her onto his lap. Always. About bad guys? He chuckled softly. A little. But mostly about good ones. Like you. Benjamin looked at her. No, sweetheart. Like you. She grinned. Can I stay up? He shook his head. Not tonight. You've got school in the morning. Promise you'll still be here when I wake up? He kissed her forehead. Always. She smiled and ran back to her room. Benjamin watched her go, then turned back to the window. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear the hum of the city, and in it, the faint whisper of his father's voice. Protect the girl. Keep her safe no matter the cost. He whispered back, I did, Dad. And I will. The next morning, Rick dropped a new folder on Benjamin's desk. Got something, he said quietly. Benjamin opened it, a list of offshore accounts tied to the Starlight Project name. But not his. Another one. Created 2 weeks ago. Rick's voice was low. Whoever's behind this, they're trying to use your foundation now. Benjamin's blood ran cold. Then we're not done yet. 6 months had passed since the trial, but for Benjamin Callahan, life had completely changed. The once cold billionaire who measured success in profits now measured it in smiles, in the laughter of children echoing through the newly renovated building on East Harlem's 112th Street. The sign above the gate read in silver letters, The Starlight Project. What was once Dunn's corrupt Hope Haven home, now pulsed with new life. Bright murals of stars and hands covered the brick walls. A garden stretched behind the building, where children planted flowers and played tag under the afternoon sun. Benjamin stood in the courtyard watching Kayla chase Bubbles with a few other kids. Her laughter, free, full, unbroken, filled him with something he couldn't put into words. Maria, his housekeeper, stood beside him, smiling. You've done something beautiful here, Mr. Callahan. Benjamin smiled faintly. Not me. This place belongs to them now. Maria looked at him thoughtfully. You sound like your father. He chuckled softly. I'd like to think he'd be proud. Inside, the building buzzed with activity. Volunteers moved through the halls, counselors, teachers, and caregivers, all part of a growing movement Benjamin had helped fund. Each room had been named after children who'd survived Dunn's network. The largest one, the Margaret Callahan Library, honored Benjamin's mother, filled with books and soft couches where children gathered for story time. Janice worked there now, organizing reading programs and mentoring young mothers. She had fully recovered and become one of the foundation's strongest voices. When Benjamin entered, she looked up with a warm smile. You're just in time. Kayla's reading to the younger ones. He watched from the doorway as Kayla sat in a circle of children, holding a book titled The Little Light That Could. Her voice carried clearly. Even when the night is dark, a single star can help someone find their way. Benjamin smiled softly. When she finished, the children clapped and Kayla looked up, spotting him. Ben, did you hear me? He nodded. Every word, sweetheart. She beamed. That was my favorite line. I think it's mine now too. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, the Starlight Project held its official dedication ceremony. The garden sparkled with hanging lights and dozens of people gathered, donors, volunteers, families, and survivors. Benjamin stepped up to the podium, adjusting the microphone. His voice was calm but filled with quiet emotion. When I first found Kayla, I thought I was saving her. But the truth is she saved me. She reminded me that compassion isn't charity, it's humanity. That love isn't weakness, it's strength. He looked out at the faces before him, some smiling, some crying softly. This project isn't about money. It's about hope. Every child here is proof that darkness doesn't win unless we let it. He paused, glancing at Janice and Kayla in the front row. And I promise, we won't let it. Applause filled the night, mingled with the sound of laughter and the glow of lights swaying in the wind. After the ceremony, Benjamin walked through the garden alone. At the far end stood a marble plaque under a small oak tree. He knelt before it, brushing his fingers over the engraved words. In memory of Margaret and Charles Callahan. Because one act of kindness can change a life forever. He closed his eyes for a moment, whispering, We did it, Dad. The right way this time. A gentle voice interrupted him. It's beautiful, Ben. He turned to see Janice, standing with her hands clasped. The moonlight caught her hair, making her look almost ethereal. He smiled. It's peaceful here. Feels like a new beginning. She nodded. It is. For all of us. They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the distant laughter of the children. Then Janice said softly, Kayla wants to stay here tonight, her first sleepover. She says she feels safe here. Benjamin chuckled. She deserves to feel safe everywhere. She does, Janice said. Then after a pause, "And so do you." Their eyes met, a moment of unspoken gratitude, connection, and understanding. Later, as Benjamin prepared to leave, Rick approached him near the front gate. "You've built something good here, Ben. But I think you should see this." He handed over a sealed envelope. Benjamin frowned, tearing it open. Inside was a typed note. "Nice speech tonight. But you're not done. Look deeper into Starlight's donors. Some of them aren't who they seem." There was no signature. Only a small, embossed symbol at the bottom. A star, identical to the one in the Starlight Project's logo. Benjamin's expression hardened. "So it's true. Someone's using my foundation." Rick nodded. "Yeah. And they're hiding in plain sight." Benjamin looked back toward the building, where Kayla's laughter still floated through the open windows. He exhaled slowly. "Then we find them. Quietly. I won't let this place become what Dunn made it." Rick smiled faintly. "I'll get the team ready." Benjamin nodded. "Tomorrow. Tonight belongs to them." That night, Benjamin stood at the edge of the garden, watching the children chase fireflies under the soft glow of lanterns. Kayla spotted him and waved, her face lit with pure joy. "Good night, Ben," she called. He waved back. "Good night, Starshine." She giggled at the nickname and ran back to her friends. Benjamin smiled, the kind of smile that came from peace, not pride. The kind born from pain turned into purpose. As he turned to leave, the wind rustled the trees and one of the garden lights flickered out. He looked back thoughtful. The plaque glimmered under the moonlight, and for a moment he thought he saw his father's shadow standing beside it, watching, proud. Then it was gone. Benjamin whispered, "I'll protect them always." He stepped into the night, unaware that from a black sedan parked across the street, a figure was watching through tinted glass, a phone in his hand recording every move. The figure lowered the phone, muttering, "Phase 2 begins." The sedan's engine started, headlights flashing once before disappearing into the city. Back in the garden, Kayla's laughter echoed softly, pure and unaware. And high above, the stars shone brighter than ever. Morning sunlight spilled across the courtyard of the Starlight Project, painting everything in gold. Birds sang from the oak tree near the entrance, and the laughter of children floated through the air like music. Benjamin Callahan stood at his office window, coffee in hand, watching life bloom below. Months had passed since the strange warning letter about the Foundation's donors, and though the investigation was quietly ongoing, today wasn't a day for suspicion. It was a day for gratitude. The first anniversary of the Starlight Project had arrived. Down below, colorful balloons bobbed in the breeze. Tables were covered with drawings, crafts, and little paper stars made by the children. Kayla, wearing a yellow dress, helped Janice hang a banner that read, "1 year of hope, 1 year of light." Benjamin smiled faintly. Seeing them together never failed to soften his heart. He turned when Maria entered his office carrying a small box wrapped in silver paper. "From Kayla," she said with a grin. He opened it carefully and found a handmade photo frame, cardboard wrapped in glitter and beads. Inside was a photo. Kayla, Janice, and Benjamin standing in the garden, all smiling. At the bottom, in Kayla's handwriting, were the words, "My family of stars." Benjamin blinked a few times, clearing his throat. "She made this." Maria nodded. "All by herself. She wanted to give it to you before the ceremony." He set the frame on his desk, staring at it for a moment. "I never thought I'd find peace, Maria. Not like this." She smiled warmly. "You didn't find it, Mr. Callahan. You created it." Later, as guests filled the garden, Benjamin stepped up to the podium again. He looked older now, not in body but in spirit, softened, wiser. Janice and Kayla stood in the front row, surrounded by volunteers, donors, and families. Benjamin took a deep breath. "A year ago this was just an idea, a dream I wasn't sure I deserved to chase. But then I met a little girl who showed me what courage really looks like." Kayla smiled shyly. He continued, his voice steady but full of feeling. "She taught me that healing isn't about forgetting the past. It's about transforming it, turning pain into purpose, loss into love." He looked around at the children playing. "Every laugh here today is proof that light can rise from darkness. That hope can be rebuilt, one heart at a time." Applause rippled through the crowd. When the clapping faded, Benjamin turned to Kayla. "Come here, Starshine." She ran to him and he lifted her up to the microphone. "Do you want to say something?" Kayla looked out at the crowd, nervous at first. Then, with a tiny voice, she said, "Thank you for giving kids like me a home. And thank you, Mr. Ben, for finding me that night." The audience melted. Some wiped tears. Benjamin kissed the top of her head and whispered, "No, Kayla. Thank you for finding me." After the ceremony, the celebration went on for hours. Children played games, families shared stories, and the smell of barbecue filled the air. Rick approached Benjamin near the garden's edge. "We tracked that message you got," he said quietly. "It came from a foundation partner in Montreal, anonymous donation route. But whoever it was, they're clean. For now." Benjamin nodded slowly. "Keep an eye out. I don't want anyone using this place for the wrong reasons." Rick smirked. "You got it, boss." Benjamin smiled faintly. "Don't call me boss anymore. Just Ben." Rick grinned. "Yes, sir, I mean Ben." As the sun set, Benjamin walked through the garden alone again. Children were heading home, waving goodbye with sticky hands from cotton candy. Kayla ran up to him one last time. "Ben, can I plant my star now?" He nodded. "Of course." They knelt together near the memorial plaque. Kayla held a small wooden stick shaped like a star. On it she'd written, "For everyone who still needs to be found." She pressed it gently into the soil. Benjamin smiled. "That's beautiful." Kayla looked up. "Do you think there are more kids out there like me?" "Yes," he said softly. "But now we're going to help them find their light too." She threw her arms around him. "I love you, Ben." He hugged her close, his eyes misting. "I love you too, Starshine." Later that night, after everyone had left, Benjamin stood alone under the stars. The garden lights flickered softly, and the city skyline glowed beyond the trees. He looked up, whispering, "Mom, Dad, I hope you can see this." A gentle wind stirred, carrying the scent of flowers and the faint sound of laughter still lingering in the air. For the first time in his life, Benjamin Callahan didn't feel empty. He didn't feel haunted by what he'd lost. He felt whole. He had built something that would outlive him, something pure, born from compassion instead of ambition. As he turned to leave, he noticed a familiar figure leaning against the garden gate. "Janice. You're still here?" he asked with a smile. She nodded. "I wanted to say thank you. For everything." He shook his head. "You don't need to thank me." She stepped closer, her eyes glistening. "You gave my daughter her life back. You gave me mine too." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was peaceful, almost sacred. Then Janice said softly, "You should get some rest, Ben. Big day tomorrow." He raised a brow. "Tomorrow?" She smiled. "We're opening the new branch in Newark, remember?" He laughed quietly. "Right. Newark. Where it all began." "Full circle," she said. He nodded. "Full circle." They exchanged one last look, of mutual understanding, of gratitude, of shared healing. Then she turned and walked toward the exit, her figure fading into the soft glow of the streetlights. Benjamin watched until she was gone, then looked up at the night sky again. Above the city, one particularly bright star twinkled, steady, unwavering. He whispered, "Thank you, Kayla. Thank you for teaching me how to see the light again." The next morning, a drone camera sweeps over the Starlight Project's rooftop garden. The plaque glimmers in the sun, and Kayla's star marker waves gently in the breeze. The narrator's voice, your voiceover tone, fades in softly. Sometimes the richest man isn't the one with the most money, but the one who finally learns what love truly means. The music swells, warm, cinematic, and emotional. Kayla's laughter echoes faintly as the screen fades to black.